Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our District 93 School Board meeting tonight.
Our Father who art in heaven, we bow our heads before thee and give thanks for the opportunity we have to assemble in a free land and to seek to do the will of our patrons and to benefit our community. We pray for thy guidance, we pray for thy strength, we pray that thou wilt be in our hearts, fill us with peace. And this we pray in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ.
Thank you, John. Well, could we have you lower the lights on the stage so that David will begin? Okay, we'll call this meeting to order. We'll have a roll call. Paul Jenkins. Here. Ray Calder.
Here.
Krista Coates.
Here.
Randy Smith. Here. And I, Chad Dan, am here. Would like to remind the patrons and visitors who are here, first of all, welcome to our meeting, and remind you that if you would like to participate in the public input part of our program, there is a roster to sign up, and when you get to that point, your name will be called, and you can provide that public input. If more than one person is planning on speaking on the same subject, we would request that you choose one spokesperson. If you have written materials for the board, please submit that material to our board clerk. And that's Sam over here on the far left. Due to their sensitive nature, complaints about personnel or an individual student must be submitted in accordance with Board Policy 4110, Public Complaints and Grievances. Grievances forms 4110F1 are found on the district's home web page under School Board tab, Board Policies. We have amended the agenda. We need a motion to amend the agenda for tonight. Pursuant to Idaho Code 742044, we amend the agenda for this meeting as follows: to add an action item to approve and amend the agenda to change proposed policy 5402, bereavement leave, from initial consideration to a 30-day review. Those requests were received yesterday and today and are time sensitive. So we need a motion to amend the agenda for the reasons stated. Moved by Greg Calder.
Second.
Second by Randy Smith. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Now we need a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
I would so move.
Moved by Paul Jenkins.
I'll second.
Second by Carissa Coates. All in favor?
Aye.
For the consent calendar, if any board member would like to remove any of the items on the consent calendar to the regular agenda, we would need a motion to do so. Are there any questions from any board members on the consent calendar? Okay, I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I would so move.
Moved by Carissa Coates,
Second.
second by Randy Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, now we are now at our public input part of our meeting pursuant to board policy number 4105, public participation in board meetings. Public input shall be held to a maximum of 1 hour and will provide an opportunity for any board member, administrator, staff member, student, or patron to raise issues of interest. The board will receive such input without comment except to ask germane questions of those speaking. Comments should be limited to 3 minutes. The board will take no action relative to any of these items during the meeting unless on the agents, but may direct the superintendent to consider such items at a subsequent meeting. Okay, we have one person that signed up to speak in public input, Sean Wyckoff from our Transportation Department. And I will note that we have a number of transportation personnel here this evening. Welcome all of you, and whoever is here representing our Transportation Department, would you raise your hand or stand? Okay, we have a number of you here. Thank you very much. There's a microphone right out front here, Sean.
Good evening, board members. My name is Sean Wyckoff, and I have been asked to represent the School District 93 Transportation Department.
Excuse me, Sean, sorry.
Yep.
Could you give us your address and your
Yep,
we need
my
his
address.
phone number, Sam, or just
I think address.
just address, I think.
Address is 242 North, 4231 East in Rigby.
42
31.
East.
Yep,
Okay, thank you, Sean.
you're welcome.
Okay, go ahead and proceed.
All right, thank you. All right, a few weeks ago, we were informed that this board is looking into the possibility of contracting the transportation department to a private company. We were told that the board was looking at ways to save the cost of building a new transportation facility. First, I would like to point out to you, you get what you pay for. Our current transportation department is appreciated and welcomed by other departments within the district. It has not always been this way, but working with Dr. Wolsenhume for the last 2 years, our relationships have been strengthened. We have an amazing group of employees and we love our jobs. We are comprised of 68 full-time, 25 partial full-time, and 8 part-time employees. We go above and beyond the call of duty. On a daily basis, we have employees that arrive at 5:30 a.m. and stay until 5:30 p.m. Most employees can't afford to leave, so they stay at the transportation department all day long to serve the district's needs. Our employees work together impeccably well. We are like family. We are there to help one another in the time of need. We are flexible and fluid with our routes and assist one another during inclement weather, the occasional breakdown, or due to staffing shortages caused by the current pandemic. Drivers are flexible and will assist by picking up multiple routes when needed. The office staff substitute for absent drivers to ensure that our students here in District 93 arrive to and from school safely. We know that many parents and students rely upon us for their transportation needs. We care about our students. When we transport them home, we ensure that they get into the house or a responsible person is present. We pick the children up and drop them off near the front of their homes for their safety. We do this to prevent them from having to walk down busy streets. Will a contracted company care for the students like our transportation department? Will they go above and beyond to ensure that the children get to school during driver shortages or inclement weather? There is so much more to consider when making such an important decision about our students' transportation needs. Will a contracted company at the drop of a hat have a bus for transportation to a wrestling match to Madison that was not properly scheduled? Will a contracted company be willing and able to do all the field trips, such as lifetime sports classes, the numerous shuttles between schools? Will a contracted company be as accommodating to our special needs students that have modified schedules? We have 5 of the best mechanics. We don't worry about feeling safe on the buses. We know and trust that the shop has them well maintained. We know that if we do have problems on an occasion, the shop is there with another bus getting us back on our routes to transport our students safely and timely. Will a contracted company be this organized and efficient? Will their buses be well maintained? The transportation is run like a tight ship. We have a staggered start and release times so drivers can transport students from multiple schools. We have bus attendants that learn and care for their special needs students. We have attendants that ride regular routes to assist with discipline problems. We have camera systems on our buses to help with bullying on the buses. If a new facility for the transportation department is the driving force for considering a contracted company, we will stay in our current facility and make it work. We will continue to give the students the quality, safe, and professional transportation that they deserve using our current facility. On a final note, a contracted company will be for profit. What this means is anything they do must be done for a profit. Wages, benefits, fuel, they will charge the district enough to make a profit. If they have to purchase a part for a bus, they will pass that cost plus some onto the district. The $10 part will be sold to the district for a profit. Contract busing is not conducive to the district's plan to save money, as those companies must make a profit, whereas the team, the family that is currently in place is doing an exceptional job with minimal cost. Comparatively, contracted companies love densely populated cities. More kids plus less distance between home and school equals more profit. Rural bus routes are pricey. District 93 isn't comprised of a densely populated city. Will contract busing really be cost effective, or will a contractor end up going out of business like the one in New York called Bowman Bus Company? I've worked for a contracted bus company. I speak from experience when I tell you that most contracted companies do not have the commitment we have here at District 93. They don't have the pride, drive, and ambition to get the job done. To them, it is just a job and a mediocre one at best. Read the reviews on Indeed about various contracted bus companies left by previous employees. They are not good. Management at most of these places is subpar. The lack of professionalism and pride, and it is about making a profit. Here at District 93 Transportation, we care about our students and serve them with pride, professionalism. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Appreciate that. Any comments from the board members? Scott, any thoughts from you on that? Or I'd just point out we've had one initial discussion as a board relating to that topic, so it's very new to us.
Yeah, maybe just one comment. There is just one part of Sean's statement that That's why I shouldn't talk. I know I was going to get emotional, so I should just shut up and let you do your job, Chairman Downs. But one part I disagree with, and he said, we get what we pay for. And I would just say with our transportation staff, with our child nutrition staff, our custodial staff, all of our wonderful classified members, I truly believe we get more than we pay. It is a huge benefit to the district, the dedication and commitment that they have to our kids and to our schools. So that's the only part I really disagreed with in his statement. We get much, much more from our classified employees.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Dr. Wilson-Hume. And Sean, thank you for that. It was well written. Appreciate your comments. Appreciate the attendance of all of the transportation people tonight. You're welcome to stay and go through the rest of the meeting with us. This topic is not on the agenda tonight, so there will not be further discussion on this topic tonight, but we do appreciate you being here. We'll now move to superintendent reports and recommendations of Dr. Wilson-Hume. Under that, I guess we'll go to Lyndon. That's what career technical programs and grants. Lyndon, we'll invite you to come up and give us your presentation.
I need to hurry and start before they all leave. I'm Lyndon Oswald. Actually, I'm over the Bonneville School District Career Technical Education, but I'm also the principal of the Career Technical School. The state reports just came out. It was exciting. 70% of CTE concentrators, that's students that take 2 or more classes in a pathway, 70% of them fill jobs, go into the military, or go on to post-secondary. We have a 49% statewide go-on rate for concentrators that move on to post-secondary, go to college, as opposed to the regular high school. Statewide is at 38%. 94% grad rate for CTE concentrators, as opposed to the regular high schools in the state, we're at 82%. So I think once these students get involved in learning by doing, they get excited and magically they rise from their beds in the morning instead of sleeping in, and they come to school. So it's a really positive situation to have technical careers in our district. Bonneville High School has a culinary arts program with Deanne Hall. She just finished successfully writing a grant and was able to receive $495 for field trips and $4,263 for refrigeration and items. That's amazing, because these teachers do that just with a little bit of help. They also have a childhood development services at Bonneville. Laura Child runs that. Nursing assistant, Amy Robinson. I don't know if you watched the news, but recently many of our medical facilities in the district, ERMAC, reached out to us. These are $4,000 medical beds that actually weigh the patient. They're pretty much out of reach with our budget, so we were so grateful. But Amy Robinson, with her nursing assistant program, received a $12,000 donation. She received 3 beds. Hillcrest High School has a digital communications program that I think we're going to move to a business management, because it goes more into what the community's talking about with entrepreneurship and small business, and people be able to, there's a lot of people starting their own businesses. So we wanted to reach out and do that, and that's Jasmine Erickson. Hillcrest also has a very highly successful culinary arts program. Colleen Becker is a grant writer. She just accomplished the PQI grant for $9,500 to get induction ranges and sanitizing dishwashers. Every year she brings in $8,000 or $9,000 in grant writing. Digital communications being taught by Terrence Thompson. He kind of has a knack for photography and using video. And I think on his TAC team, he even has Paul Jenkins on his TAC team. But he's excited. He's going 100 miles an hour. If you know him, he goes 100 miles an hour. He never quits. They also have a childhood development and services program with Courtney Shields. She brought in $10,681 to her program, writing an improvement grant. Thunder Ridge has digital communications with Rebecca Webster and Jackson Lyon. They probably have our strongest business department in the district. Business management is being done by Kimberly Mowry Smith. We have education assistant. That's where we're training people to be teachers. That's Keely Wallace. Nursing assistant, Andrea Dotson, received 4 of the medical beds. That was a $16,000 donation. Culinary arts, Brenda Williams. We stole her from District 91. She's doing an amazing job, and she's always bringing in the best of everything for our programs. And we're going to try, I kind of look at it as train the trainer. We're a little short on physical therapists and people at ball games. We're going to start a rehabilitation services pathway at Thunder Ridge. And we got Todd Johnson, who's got like 20 plus years doing that. We're going to try to get him certified, but that program's already been applied for with the state. We're excited about that one. Bonneville Online has digital communications. They kind of borrowed Cliff Waite from Bonneville. But he wrote a grant for $8,823. He's bringing a lot of technology into that program. He's also thinking about doing the dual pathway. We're going to apply for programming and software development because that's where the cyber end is. And so we're going to kind of tap that resource and get cybersecurity into that environment. And we're in a roundabout way, we've got pharmacy technician going on with the online school. It's a partnership with Idaho State University. We're looking at making that one of our pathways, but it's kind of a tough one and an expensive one. We're grateful for Idaho State University. Lincoln High School has a very successful culinary arts program, and she wrote a grant for $2,668. And then we have what's called the Technical Career School, and that's a high school like any other high school with graduation and everything else. That's my school. At the Career Technical High School, we have medical assisting, which is a new program this year. We had a $4,000 bed donated, and that's Jeffrey Clement. Emergency medical technician, that's our EMT program. You ought to come over and look. We've got some pretty neat things in there. We've simulated a classroom and like a fire station bay with an ambulance. They were given a $4,000 bed from ERMAC as well. We have, some people don't know this, but we have an ecology and natural resource management pathway in our ag program. That's for all these kids that want to be fish and game, BLM workers. It's all about people that go out in the field and save our natural resources. It's kind of exciting and a new program. With that, we do a dual pathway called animal science, which is like your veterinarian assistant. And we have several kids out in the community working at veterinarian clinics as we speak. We have a brand new pre-engineering program. It kind of came in a little slow because, you know, you hear the word pre-engineering, you think, ooh, tough. Well, it is kind of tough because it's AutoCAD. There's a lot of things you have to learn, but we're kind of livening it up with robotics, and they're into alternative energies and going into solar and wind technology. And I'll share a little bit about what they're going to do at the end. We have a very successful welding program with Tristan Telford. We teach all different 5 types of metal welding at our school. It's almost unheard of at a high school level. We will be competing this Friday. If anybody wants to come out and watch our kids in their competition to qualify for state. We have an automotive collision repair program. That's amazing. That's Sean Beebe, sorry. Automotive maintenance and light repair, Ron Sear's been there for quite a while, and he has a highly successful program. A lot of you in the district have had your cars fixed at our school. We have what's another dual pathway, and this is the exciting one that was on the news tonight. We have a residential construction program, but also you can take cabinetry and millwork. Now with that combination, we attracted some really neat people that have come into our school. As you saw on the news tonight, Professional Builder Contractor License Review Board, that's a mouthful, they came in and awarded us a $4,000 check to start on our mini house. We're going to do a mini house on a trailer, and we're going to take it around to the middle schools and show it off. And we've been invited to have it in the parade of homes. So we got to do a great job.
Awesome.
The Idaho Home Builders Association got wind of it, and they immediately threw $3,000 into that program as well. So we will start construction on the mini home next week after we're done competing. And the pre-engineering class is going to help us do some off-grid stuff with that mini home. Maybe make it so that we have solar panels and some things that might attract somebody to want to buy it in a year and make it part of their own. I speak very quickly, which is appreciated by about 40 people behind me. But if you have any questions, I'd love to field any questions.
I do, Lyndon. So I apologize, my mind was elsewhere when you first started. You went through some statistics.
That's the state report that was just released by the state of Idaho.
Will you do that again, please?
Yeah, 70% of CT concentrators, that's students that have taken 2 or more tech classes. They have a 70% placement rate in post-secondary, the military, and in the jobs, going directly to a job.
Okay.
49% of those students that concentrate go to college post-secondary. That's a high rate because the state average is 38% for other high schools. And then 94% graduation rate. We're a big part of that at our tech school. We have a high graduation rate as well, but 82% for regular high schools. So that's, like I said, once they get that I'm going to learn by doing attitude, you can be good with your hands, but it depends on what you're touching with your hands. You know, being good with your hands doesn't mean you're going to be successful. Learning by doing means you got to do the work in the classroom. You got to get to school. And so that's our philosophy at our school.
Great, thank you. Any comments or questions from board members?
How many total students are involved in our district?
I run about 100 to 125 students full-time. I can take 50 seniors, 50 juniors, and 25 sophomores. We always have a waiting list on our juniors and our sophomores.
Is that a technical career?
That's my school, the
That's your
Technical
school.
Career High School.
Then the other programs are...
And the other
at individual-
programs, it can feed up to 500 if it needs to, but I think we average around 200 to 300 kids from the 3 high schools that come in. They only come in for 2 hours, and then they go back to their high schools.
On the graduation charts, did I read it right? There's not one minority in the current class?
Of which?
Not a minority that's graduating from the trade school?
But we have minorities throughout.
Yeah, I'll address that when I talk about graduation rates.
All right, then the other question is, it seems social seems to be so important to these kids that some of them might not come to your program because they think it separates them from their friends. How do we address that to get more involved? We have 4,000 roughly high school students, and I think the chart our superintendent showed only 30% of students that graduate from Bonneville School District are in college up through 6 years after, is that right?
Yeah, that's the statistics.
So how can we
for
get
that.
another 30% into your program? It's come a long way, so I got to admire.
Well,
what
I've got
you've
9 buildings, but now we're landlocked. So I would love to put a diesel program and an electrician and plumbing program on the other side of that new parking lot.
done. How about beautician, dental assistant?
Dental assistant, we've looked at. Beautician, we don't try to compete with the beauty colleges, but we can do that, but we just haven't felt like there were a lot of students that wanted to get into that because they just go straight to Vogue and to the other programs. We have to do a lot of research to bring a new program
Sure.
on. I love aviation,
So do I.
but I
That'd be
could
great.
not get, and I had a huge donor, a former dentist that was going to give us a lot of money to build an airplane. We just could not form a TAC team that said it was needed. and we couldn't get interest. Social's real important, Randy. That's why we allow every one of our tech kids, including my kids that are full-time, they can go to the Bonneville dances, the Thunder Ridge dances. So they get to go to all the activities. And a lot of the kids coming in, a lot of my kids still wrestle. And they still do all those activities with their friends. And they can even go over, as long as they behave, they can go over and eat at the other high schools. But the minute they don't behave, there's a consequence for their actions. And they have to come back and earn it back.
Do you see or envision in the future that this is what I've thought is that we eventually get a community vocational school with multiple districts so that we get to the economy of scale for like a welding program, so we can afford the instructor, you know, that are making $70,000, $80,000. We'd have to figure out a way to do that. But if we did that, and even the beautician school, I mean, I think it's $21,000 to go get their license after high school. How much of that can be done? Yes, we'd be competing against them, but we do that whenever we educate, in a sense, with online colleges and other things. But what can we do to expand?
I think it's all about having the property and the location. I mean, having 9 buildings, I think I've hit the maximum number of every classroom's full. If I could build and if I could find a facility, I would love to have a regional medical center like Meridian Medical. That's a former wrestler from Bonneville that I wrestled with that runs it. It's a great program. I would love to have a regional medical center so we can bring in all our CNA and all that into one location. But it's all about timing, money, budget.
I have to admit, I'm kind of envious of Jefferson in their new proposal where they're going to make the junior high a vocation campus right next to the high school. And they've only got one high school. So it makes it more attractive for that social experience where they can jump back and forth and feel part of both.
The world's our oyster. We just have to discover it and find the pearls.
I have done a lot in the last 20 years, this district has.
Yeah, from when you and I were at Bonneville and we had 3 programs.
Yeah, a lot better.
That's awesome.
Can I just make a quick comment?
Yeah.
I think it's incredible what you have done and what programs that we offer. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We couldn't do it without everyone in this room, all the patrons and everybody.
How many of the kids, Lyndon, go down to ISU following your program, your technical careers, high school? Because ISU really has some good technical programs. I mean, they've got aviation, they've got, you know,
they're big. They're big in drone technology too. And we've been trying to tap drone technology through our engineering.
But your goal is to have them job ready when they graduate, is that?
Most of my welders go straight to the workforce. And I say fortunately and unfortunately. But when you're offered, one of my students just got offered $27.50 an hour on the pipeline. Even though the pipeline, I guess, isn't running, it still has to be maintained. But, you know, how can I tell him he needs to go to post-secondary right now? He says, I'll save my money and I'll go later. Right now, I'm going to make the big bucks and buy a new pickup. I couldn't argue with him. I said, good for you. That, and he's 6'5", and I didn't want to argue. But yeah, a lot of our welders go right into the workforce. A lot of our carpenters go right into framing. We got an invite today from Skidmore Construction. He'll take every kid that we'll give him to start framing, but we got great contractors out there that are doing the same, inviting our kids to come.
That's awesome, you're doing that small house, that's cool.
Well, we're hoping it looks really good.
Any other thoughts or comments for Lyndon? Great, thank you, Lyndon.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, I'll now invite Dr. Thomas Kennedy to come up to present to the board the Idaho Mastery Education Network information. I know you love statistics, Dr. Kennedy, and the last time you did that, you were way over my head. So I'll listen. I'll be careful to listen.
Today's going to be a little bit simpler. Appreciate being here. Good evening, Chairman Dance, board members, and Superintendent Wilson-Hume. I'm Thomas Kennedy, like you said, principal of Bonneville Online Elementary School, one of 4 elementary schools that is a part of the Idaho Mastery Education Network, or IMAN. The other 3 elementary schools are Bridgewater, Discovery, and Yukon. Last year, we all received what was called an exploration grant, where we began exploring mastery principles, spending the whole year reflecting on our current practices and creating goals for the next year. This year, we all received what's called a practicing grant. It provided us the necessary financial and collegial support to continue with our ongoing journey with mastery education. Idaho Code, it defines mastery-based education as an education system where student progress is based on when a student demonstrates mastery of competencies and content, not seat time or the age or grade level of the student. Tonight, we are all excited to share where each of our schools are on this journey. First, you'll hear from Natalie Burr, one of our teachers at Bonneville Online Elementary School, then Kara McCartney, Bridgewater principal, then Shelley Andrus, principal at Yukon, and last but not least, Ben Parker will share where Discovery Elementary is in their mastery education journey. Here's Natalie Burr.
With the number of options our families have for their curriculum, we wanted to find a way to support our students regardless of the curriculum they've chosen. The Bonneville Online Elementary School team has identified math skills that all students need to be successful from kindergarten to 8th grade. We also created quizzes to determine our students' level of mastery on each of these skills. Close to 3,000 quizzes have been taken since the beginning of the year with over 90% proficiency. I've been able to use this information to determine where students have shown mastery of skills and where I need to provide more targeted instruction in one-on-one sessions. To facilitate these individualized lessons, we've purchased iPads for our teachers to provide immediate, two-way, visual, and written communication. Over the past year, as a team, we've organized skill-specific resources that all students have access to. These resources provide support for every essential math skill. Parents have been using these resources to guide their instruction, ensuring students attain the essential skills we've identified. Looking forward, we want to strengthen our skills as coaches, assisting our parents in their instruction at home. Our leadership team is planning to attend the Student-Centered Coaching Conference being held in Denver later this year to help us learn more about how we can better support student learning at Bonneville Online Elementary School. Our work with IMAN has been a great catalyst to a positive change in our school. Now I'll turn the time over to Kara McCartney.
Good evening. I am Kara McCartney, the principal at Bridgewater Elementary, and it's been such a pleasure to be on this journey with not only my fellow colleagues, but to have the opportunity to work with the State Department for this IMAN grant. As Dr. Kennedy had described, that we started last year on our journey of just exploring what mastery was. We recognized at Bridgewater that many of our practices they were, mastery at heart. A lot of our teachers were putting in the work that they didn't even realize the terminology and vocabulary tied in directly to what our state defines as mastery-based goals. This year, we have written a grant and we were awarded $11,400, and basically to just continue exploring, meeting, and collaborating on mastery principles. Our 2 focuses have been for learning personalized and student empowerment. And through that, the team has gotten together. We meet roughly once a month, if not more, that ties into leadership team meetings. And we really dig deep into what the framework of mastery has for us, as well as what practices can we enhance in our daily classroom instruction. We hope to continue exploring those options. We've been looking for the perfect conference to support maybe literacy, the work we're doing with RTI, the work with our special needs population, and kind of bridging and closing that gap with all that we have going on at Bridgewater. It's just been a great journey, and we're really looking forward to continuing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Board, Superintendent.
UConn was awarded $21,000 this year, and part of the inspiration for taking mastery to UConn was the kindergarten wall. The kindergarten wall is a blue wall at UConn that the kids could sign off when they accomplished essential skills by the end of kindergarten. And what was interesting is that there were only a few names at the very edge. And so why stop there, right? Why stop achieving the kindergarten essentials at the end of kindergarten? So those basic goals for mastery became the inspiration for other essentials. And you'll see that we wanted those essential learnings visibly demonstrated and celebrated. So now we have essential goals that are declared around the building. The kids sign off on them. And just like Kara said, the teachers the first year said, what are the stipends for? And I said, you're being paid to think. We're just thinking about what this could mean. And the pleasant surprise is that so much of what they're already doing is mastery based. Now we're just providing a framework. And one of the most important things that the IMIN team wanted to do for UConn was pay for continuing education credits for the teachers, for the work they're already doing, honoring that work, putting it in a framework, labeling it, and having them receive credit for it. So a lot of it is for people, spending money on stipends and those continuing education credits offered to all UConn teachers, and then getting crystal clear from the teachers to the PLC teams all the way down to the kids. So these data binders were a really powerful tool, and now we're working toward the kids being able to pull their data binders off, and they can explain to you where they are on their journey toward essential mastery. So thank you again for facilitating this for us. We really appreciate it. Discovery, Ben Parker.
Thank you, Shelley. Unlike these wonderful people, I joined partway through because of my new position at Discovery Elementary. And so this last year has been great to meet with them, to learn from their experiences and their training for that first year that I didn't get. And so I appreciate all of them as esteemed colleagues in this process. And of course, Ken Marlowe for kind of starting that process last year and the year before and getting us on the right track. So we were awarded about $13,000 this last year. And I want to thank Lyndon for his presentation as well, because a lot of what our focus has been at Discovery has been to get experiential learning activities for our kids through field trips and exploration of different careers, different opportunities that they have in our community, bring guest speakers in, and then also providing some training for our teachers through restorative circles and those practices. And so, and then some of our money was also for some materials for some mastery-based goals for some of our lower grades as well. And so we've had a really great time. Transportation, again, if I could put a plug in for them, have been awesome in getting us to places that we need to go, including to hopefully Montana this spring for one of our fourth grade field trips to go explore Crystal Park and dig for crystals and learn about the geology, the ecology, the ecosystem there in Montana that's very similar to our ecosystem here in Idaho. And so we love this mastery grant because it brings our kids to these experiences through this funding. And so we're really glad to be able to participate and help them have these experiences that will eventually lead them to experiences similar to what Lyndon is providing at Technical Careers and actually throughout the district through his programs. And so we're really glad that we are a part of this, and we're moving on to some neat things next year, building on some of those restorative circles through some mindfulness meditation, and then we'll also continue a lot of these experiential trips for most of our grades into next year is our hope. So thank you.
Great. Thanks. And just in conclusion, one thing you may have noticed is that each of our schools are doing different things. One of the things we learned last year, working with the Mastery Network, working with Aaron McKinnon from the State Department, is that there's just every school who's kind of taken it in a different direction to focus on students, focus on their individual needs and how we can meet them at a school level. So as you can see, some of our funding did go to help provide stipends for teachers because of the extra time they put in to learn more and to do more. And so it's just been a great opportunity to celebrate some of the things that we're already doing in our district, but to try and take it that next level. And it takes time and energy, and we appreciate your support and theirs as well. I know our district has gotten, I think this year, just over $100,000 altogether from the Mastery Network to help provide these resources for our students, and we've seen a lot of great things come from that. And so we appreciate your support and the state departments as well, and then we're doing great things that we wanted to share with you all. And if you guys have any questions, we're here. Otherwise, we're just excited about what we're doing for our students.
So I have a question, Dr. Kennedy. So these programs are in the elementary schools separate from what we used to call Jaguar. I mean, that's a separate program for different older students. Help me understand that.
That program started with this type of grant 7 years ago, I think. So it was this Idaho Mastery Education Network that was the genesis for Team Jaguar. And then since then, it's of course evolved into Praxia, but other schools have also taken advantage of that grant opportunity.
Yeah. Years ago, when Praxia first started, when I was at Rocky Mountain Middle School, there was a pilot of 19 schools that Rocky Mountain was part of with that one team. And here we are years later that they're still accepting new schools who want to learn about mastery principles and adopt some changes. I think that experience that I had with them helped me, understand this process going forward, and I think we were able to work together to fill out the grant application. And I hate to say it, but I mean, it really was kind of some easy resources as far as setting some goals, having some plans, and then having the state give us some additional funding to support the projects that we were doing. And we've had great support since then, as we're able to meet on a regular basis with other schools across the state and learn together, and it's just been a great opportunity. Any other comments?
Yeah, I have a question. So you speak about the next level. What would the next level be?
Well, as far as what we're doing in our district, as far as identifying essentials, having those common assessments so that we make sure that all students learn at high levels, really that next level is getting there, and having a process where we're continually working together to make sure every kid learns. And I think having a better understanding of what mastery is, and that it is based on the individual student, that some kids take a little more time, some kids need more support, that having those resources to understand that can get us to that point where more students are learning at higher levels. So I mean, that's kind of how we see it, and of course that's kind of a grand idea, but when you think about the individuals that we work with, it just tends to make more sense, I think. Oh, please. And feel free to
along with that, right before COVID, we were having some really great discussions about mastery-based grading, standards-based grading, and those two things really dovetail for us, and really understanding how kids learn, and not necessarily this scale of 0 to 100, but one of my favorite people always says, it doesn't matter when you learn how to ride a bike, let's just get them to learn how to ride the bike. And so that to me is part of this mastery-based learning. We want kids to succeed at any time, and I love what Shelley's doing at her school with that. It doesn't matter when you learn it. We just want you to learn it. We want you to master it, because when you become a master at it, then that never leaves you. And that's part of our whole goal for our next step.
Perfect.
And if I could add one thing, you asked what that next level looks like. I think it looks very different for all of us. I think we're just excited to access the money that the state is putting into having each of our schools understand what that may look like. I mean, Mastery is this massive, umbrella of information, but they break it down in the frameworks of looking at how are students empowered, how is learning personalized, how are competencies, which are those essential standards, seeked, from the kids' perspective, and then how do we measure when kids master that? So I think it doesn't necessarily look like, because we're participating in that, we're going to become the Jaguar, school, or it varies throughout. And really, I think each one of us have looked at our teams and gotten their buy-in, their leadership, and really had each of our teams explore And I think over time, we're stealing ideas from one another, like, oh, I loved how you used money for that, and I paid out of pocket for it, like, oh. So it's just been a really great opportunity to use money that is out there. So, yeah.
I think also it's this is a framework that you have put together with Superintendent Wolstenhume. We talk about it not only as, or not also just essentials where we're heading, but also that baseline that we can guarantee all students will achieve. So what do we want all students to master? And we do want all students to master safe, connected, and cared for every day, and all students reading by the end of 3rd grade. And so it's an opportunity for the leadership teams to spend that time buying into what does that look like at UConn, how will we guarantee those things for all, guarantee that baseline mastery, and then open the ceiling for creative exploration too. Thank you.
Can't believe I'm doing this, but here I am. I think another really important aspect of it is that every student can show what they've learned different ways. And that's one of the things that we've learned really well at our school, is that mastery can be demonstrated, that competency can be demonstrated in a myriad of ways. And so what it looks like for one student, even from school to school, looks different from another. So I think that's a really important aspect of what we're doing also. Thank you.
So all of you have been talking about students within your separate elementary schools participating in this. So are these kids all doing it online, or I'm not understanding how this is happening, and how do you know who's, which kids are going to participate?
So basically, being part of the network, our separate schools, so we're the online elementary school, so all of our kids are at home learning with their parents with different curriculum, but in the typical traditional school, they're implementing their practices in their building with their students, with their leadership teams, in person at each grade level, at every grade level. So really all of our students in our respective schools are experiencing the benefit of these conversations and these plans that we've made. And what we're doing right now is really in the process of looking at our plans for next year, and we'll be looking at potentially requesting grant funding to continue some of the work that we're doing, to help fund the time that teachers are making and the resources, like for the experiences like Ben talked about, and some of the resources that really help us outside of our regular budgets to make sure that these programs go forward. And so that's been exciting. But it's really the goal is to impact every single student with this work.
I have a question. Is there an expectation the majority of the students learn it at the same time, and then this helps pick up those who might struggle learning it under that format? Or is it just there's not a time or an expectation, like to learn your times tables or whatever it is? Is this up through 3rd grade only?
Well, so for us, we're kindergarten through 8th grade at the online elementary school. The other elementary schools are kindergarten through 6th. And so for us, and that's a conversation that we had over the years at Rocky Mountain Middle School, is a lot of the focus is saying, okay, people want to go at their own pace, and for the kids who move faster, it's great. They can go ahead. At the middle school level, they're taking high school courses, they're getting associate's degrees, working towards early graduation and college credits. At the elementary level, it's about moving at your own pace with the realization that if you're not quite at grade level, we're still going to use our supports and our resources to get you as close to that grade level as possible, so that you don't get further and further behind as the years go on. Realizing that people do work at their own pace, but we also do believe that every kid can learn at high levels, and that it's our collective responsibility to help support them in getting there. So it's not like we say, oh, this student is, he struggles, he's going to take, 10 years to finish 6th grade. Like we're still using all of our resources to support them learning those most important things in the time that we have them to get closer to that grade level that they're in at any given time.
So at the conclusion, we want them all to learn, and a majority of them progress maybe 2/3 of the class, and the other third take a different route but get to the same place.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, there's a lot of skills that we're trying to get every student to as quickly as possible, but realizing that their unique needs are just going to require unique solutions.
Just what percent of learning in this age group is affected by home?
Like in general or in the online school?
Either or. It's probably a lot higher online.
Well, yeah, I'd say in the online school, a lot is affected by the home since they're at home. And what we've got is we've got amazing families who are at home with their students and working through a curriculum with them, and they are just dedicated, and we support them in that process. When it comes to students in the school building, one of you wouldn't mind sharing?
Yeah. That is a wonderful question, and I think all of us, and maybe I'm speaking for all of you, could say that 100% of our kids are affected by their home environment, whether that's positively or negatively, the influence that they have from the amount of literacy lap time to the exposure of very basic things. To give you an example, we had worked hard last year to had a connection through the Colonial Theater, and a friend kind of hooked our schools up with a show and provided that opportunity for kids to be enriched with music. And it was amazing to find out how many of our students, just speaking from Bridgewater, had said, "I've never been across Idaho Falls. I've never been beyond." They'd never been in a theater before. But then, of course, we have many, many kids that have enriched opportunities, flying, airports, everything. So I think to say how many kids are affected, well, it matters. It matters what we're talking about. And but I know our passion is for all kids to access every opportunity that we can. And as we look at this, and it's interesting to hear the questions. I so appreciate the support and the interest in this, because I don't think one of us has a set answer of what this looks like within our school. It's not a set curriculum. It's not something that the kids just plug away at. It's exposure to many of these opportunities. Like Ben has done a really great job, providing the fourth grade particularly with that, the data binders. And so every one of us is kind of saying, what does our group of kids need? What sparks that passion for learning so that everybody can meet those marks?
I guess what I think myself that 50% of the child's outcome in their education experience has got to be attributed back to the home. And more of the home wants the school to do it, and the school can't necessarily do one-on-one when there's 25 students and help them in their deficiencies. Does this program, where it is, Dr. Kennedy's was online, that involves the parents. How do you get the parents to buy into what you're trying to do? Because they're pretty sure it's your responsibility to educate their children, but I'm saying for us that know, a lot of it happens at home.
Right, for sure. I think it starts with our basic principles that our amazing leaders have set an example. And we heard transportation just echo the sentiments of it starts with the relationship building. Right, our leadership team at the district level, along with you, have really empowered all of us to take these risks, to build relationships and have that autonomy within our school to know which kids and which families need more, right? I mean, look at the opportunities that we provide in each of our buildings for a variety of different things, pastries with parents, right? Getting them in the door, come, get a free book. And we're using some of that mastery money for those type of resources so we can adequately connect with the families. And maybe there are families that we look at and say, they might need a little extra. They may need some explanation, some assistance with parenting and being on the same page. And hey, thanks so much for coming today. And we all have been given that responsibility and flexibility to do each of those things within the building. And I think it's like you looking out here, you know, you're going to cater to each one of our personalities or questions in a different way. And I think we just try to really do that naturally, so we can create an environment where kids know that school is safe no matter what's happening at home, whether it be positive or negative experiences. And we want to just empower kids to give them as much as we can so they know that the education journey will continue.
Thank you.
Okay.
What is the potential for expansion, like to move into other elementaries throughout the district?
Like the name implies, the Idaho Mastery Education Network, it's just that. There's many schools and districts throughout the state that are part of this. So the opportunity for expansion, as other schools have been interested in our district this year, I've reached out to Aaron McKinnon at the State Department, and he's just given me the information to get them involved now. There'll be an opportunity to apply for participation in the grants, in the coming months. So I think there's definitely opportunity because there is funding out there at the state level, and there's just a lot of resources and a lot of people to learn with in this whole process. So definitely a big opportunity.
I'm just jealous. My kids, I've got twins, and one's doing multiplications in first grade, and one barely can figure out what a number is. So I like the idea that you're teaching to kind of their level, but you're still bringing them up and encouraging them along the way. So, thank you.
Do we have any, Dr. Kennedy, any of the children where English is not their primary language participating in this?
Yes.
Are we helping those children?
I'm gonna go off on a limb and say that there's a potential that there are schools where.
Yes. Yeah. Bridgewater is one of the highest, if not the highest, I believe, of English language learners. Just about 100 of our students, and they absolutely, every student in our building will touch in some capacity, whether it's their teacher and what they're doing within mastery in their classroom, but they all have an opportunity to access this, absolutely.
Great.
And yeah.
Chairman Dance,
Yes.
Would you mind if I just spoke to Kara's question for a minute?
Yes.
I think it'd be helpful. So I had the opportunity to attend, I think it was an Idaho Superintendent's Network with the State Department of Education when they first were launching this Idaho Mastery Education Network. And they brought in an educational scholar and researcher whose name is Robert Marzano, probably one of the top 3 education researchers in the country, and his work has really shaped the direction of schools across the country. In fact, our teacher evaluation system is largely based on the work he did in the late 90s. And so he came and spoke to us, and he said he had created this framework based on all of his research for schools that he titled High Reliability Schools. And he basically said there's 5 essential steps that schools go to become what he termed a high reliability school. And the definition for that is a school where we know that every student is learning the things that they're supposed to learn. And so as we talk about our pyramid of success, or those essential standards that have been identified by teachers, then by progressing through that, you actually achieve that vision of knowing that all students truly are learning at high levels. And the first 3 tiers of that, the first one is a safe, supportive, and collaborative school culture. And if you look at our pyramid of student success, and it's what Principal Adler spoke to, that is the foundation of our pyramid of student success. And then it talks about highly effective instruction in every classroom. And then the third step is a guaranteed viable curriculum, which simply means we've identified the essentials that every student should learn, and we've shrunk our instruction and our expectations enough that we know that every student can learn those. And then the 4th step is getting into standards referenced or standards-based grading, and then the final step is competency learning, so this idea of mastery-based learning. So the key to know is that's the end goal. It's not where our schools are now. And what I would tell you is every school in our district is engaged in that work in at least those first 3 levels. So what these grants have done for the principals that have been proactive enough to go out and get apply for those grants is it's provided additional resources to provide, I guess, more support to the work we're expecting all of our schools to do. So even though our schools are at different places along the way, there's no question we've had a strong focus on those first 3 levels. We had our toes in the water on that standards reference grading right before COVID hit, and that will be a discussion that comes, but we have to make sure we're progressing through those levels the right way. When schools try to skip to the end and they start out with mastery-based learning, they don't have that foundation in place, it doesn't work. And it was probably the most funny thing about that meeting was he came, he spoke to that, and then the State Department said, okay, here we go, mastery-based rolled it out anyway. And really the work the schools should be doing is that foundational work to build up to it.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Well, thanks very much, and appreciate your comments and your presentations, and congratulations for being able to find extra money to work these programs.
Thank you for giving us the time.
You bet. All right, thank you. Let's go ahead and move on to the next 3 items. Graduation rates from Dr. Wolstenhume, and looks like you've got 3 items right in a row, Scott. So.
Thank you, Chairman Dance. So our regularly scheduled report for this evening was on our graduation rates. These were just released to us from the state for the graduating class of 2021. So there's a pretty good delay between when our kids graduate and when we get these reports, but there's a lot of work that goes in on our principal side in the fall to make sure that the rates that are being calculated and reported are accurate as far as the definition. So the first thing I want to point out, we've talked about this before, but for our new board members, this should be very helpful information. That is to know how we determine, or how the state determines, and honestly, how the federal government determines graduation rates. So it was probably back in 2013 or 2014, somewhere in there, that we went to this universal definition of graduation rates across the country, courtesy of the U.S. Department of Education. And I understand the goal is to make sure that when we report graduation rates, it's going to be the consistent number regardless of where you go to school, whether you're going to school in Idaho or California or New York, we're using the same calculations. There are some frustrations that go with this particular definition, though, and I certainly want to talk about those as we talk about our graduation rates. So the formula is the number of students who graduate in 4 years with a regular diploma, and I've got those words underlined and I'll speak about those in a moment, divided by the number of students who entered high school 4 years earlier or after. So basically, every student who starts at one of our high schools in 9th grade is going to count in that definition unless we have documented that they've transferred to another school or they've passed away. So that's the bar that's in place for these. So one thing our high school principals have done a really good job with, particularly at the online school at Lincoln, is making sure we're documenting when students leave where they're going, because before we were a little bit loose on that, and that really was showing that we had really low graduation rates in those schools, and those principals have done a really good job of making sure when kids are checking out that they've got documentation of where they're going. So to count, students have to earn a regular high school diploma by the summer after their 4th year.
Just a quick clarification on that second divisor, if I'm using that term right. Or after, meaning like if someone moves here in 11th grade, they count.
Yep, so somebody moves here in 11th grade and they go into the cohort number. So as soon as they enroll into our school, they're included. That's particularly meaningful for Lincoln High School. So as Lincoln High School takes kids not only from our district, but from outside of our district, in the interest of trying to help them progress towards education, the moment they enroll them, they're accepting responsibility now for that kid's graduation rate.
So if Bonneville sends if a Bonneville student at the 11th grade goes to Lincoln, he's taken off Bonneville's numbers and put on Lincoln's numbers. So we don't lose track of that.
Right. And not to throw our 3 comprehensive high schools under the bus, but typically those kids are going to Lincoln and they are significantly behind in graduation, and Lincoln ends up getting left holding the ball for that graduation rate. So when you see that their numbers are low, we have collective ownership for that low rate among all of our high schools. It's not a Lincoln problem. And again, Lincoln does a great job. They could turn a lot of kids away to protect their graduation rate, but in the interest of helping kids, they're enrolling kids that come from really challenging circumstances, trying to give them a shot at graduation. So that's why I'm not a huge fan of using this as our metric for graduating kids, because we want to help every kid, even if it means we end up looking low sometimes in our numbers. So positive things, what you'll see is, again, overall we've been increasing our graduation rate. A link in there that is at the bottom, but you can see they've done a really good job a lot of times on the paperwork side of documenting where kids are going, but more than that, in changing practices. I'll just tell you, stupid, I don't want to get emotional tonight. Lincoln is just a fundamentally different school than it was when I came to this school district. It was literally a last chance high school, and it was, you go there, and if you don't toe the line and do what the hell you're supposed to, you're out on your ear. And it has radically changed with Gordon Howard stepping in there and then Lance Miller stepping in afterwards. The culture at the school is different. It's much more caring, much more supportive. We go through expulsion hearings there rather than just kicking kids out. We do things the right way, and we're seeing the benefits of that at that school. And then, as Lyndon spoke to, TCHS is the grade line at the top, and they have an incredibly high graduation rate. Those kids are engaged in their learning, and typically when they go to TCHS, they're staying there and they're graduating from that school. But overall, what you'll see is we've improved in our graduation rates as a district every year since 2018, which is just a testament to the work that our schools are doing. So that's probably the most important thing I wanted to share tonight. Are there questions about that from board members?
I think it's good we held even in the pandemic year, but
yeah,
what is that percent? High 80s?
So that year of the pandemic, as a district where we're in yellow, we were mid 80s, about 80 to 85%. So, and in that pandemic year, we did make some changes. We allowed students to graduate from our comprehensive high schools at the state minimum graduation requirements instead of holding them to the higher standard of our district requirements. We went to really a pass or not pass grading system. We did a lot of things internally to help kids graduate because we didn't want to lose kids that year and really penalize them for the rest of their life through that shutdown.
So it's 12. A lot of long school board meetings.
Yes, there were.
Just brought back some
at my kitchen
tough
table.
memories, baby.
Yep.
So it's 12% that don't graduate in the calendar year of the graduating class, the district's 1,300 students roughly.
Yes, we have graduating classes of roughly 1,000, just shy of 1,000 right now. So
it's just 120 of that class.
Right. Yep.
Which is enough. But
yep. Yep. And what we've seen is we have right around truly about a 8 to 10% dropout rate, and that's what we're trying to focus on, is keeping kids from dropping out of school, which may not mean they're going to meet the state definition of a graduate, but we want to keep them in school and make sure that they graduate. So the other ones are just real quick, just comparisons. This is true in our graduation rates as well as in our student achievement, but there is a discrepancy between our predominantly white students and those who are minorities when it comes to graduation. You can see that that plays out across the board. To your question earlier, Randy, this doesn't show that we graduated 0 students that are minorities from TCHS. This is a state report. And so for the interest of protecting students' information, there's a threshold of 25 students. So if they have fewer than 25 students, they're not going to report that data out. So what that tells us is they had fewer than 25 students who are minority graduate from TCHS. But TCHS, graduates about 40 students a year. And so if 20% of those students are minority, they're not ever going to show up on that report. Okay, same thing, and this really mirrors because most of the students that are minority are Hispanic. We also have a small percentage that are black and a small percentage that are Asian, Pacific Islander, but those numbers really mirror each other.
Which of the 3 high schools has a majority of Hispanic or Latino?
So I'd have to go back and check.
Not a majority, but the largest.
They're all fairly close, but Thunder Ridge has the highest percentage of students that are Hispanic.
What are they doing different than Bonneville? That's dramatic.
Yeah, that's a great question and something. I haven't shared this with principals yet, and so those will be good discussions for us going forward on what is the difference in those schools. So
almost 20 points.
Yeah, it's a pretty significant difference.
Yeah, of course, race is a factor, but it'd also be interesting to know kind of to cross-compare, like,
Demographics.
economic
Right. Yep.
issues too, which obviously are going to have.
Yeah, yeah, and that is one unfortunate thing we're dealing with right now is we have lost any accurate data on socioeconomic status for our students through the pandemic. So essentially, because we went to 100% of our students being
reduced
fed,
lunch,
yeah, we no longer have accurate numbers now for 2 years in a row on socioeconomic status, which is it's great that we can feed our kids. It's unfortunate we don't have that data. As we're looking at boundary changes, as we're looking at this data, it's really challenging not to have that data anymore.
So almost 1 in 5 in our district are Hispanic. 19%.
Yeah, we're about 18%. Yep.
18.
Yep. So this is based on the limited data we have on economically disadvantaged, and again,
That's impressive. I
yeah,
think.
yep, it is. And so, you know, I would just say we're also fairly limited on that data that we have back on who truly is economically disadvantaged and who's not. So, students with disabilities, this is where that definition becomes really important. So the 2 key words in that definition are they graduate within 4 years and they graduate with a regular diploma. So when students have an individual education plan, there are times that we determine that there are going to be graduation requirements that are modified or that they're not held to because we need to do that as an accommodation for students. The minute we do that for a student on their IEP, which is the best thing for kids, they are no longer counted as having a regular diploma. And then the second thing is those students are entitled to stay in schools like you saw at the flight program when we had our work session at the flight program. None of those students count as a graduate, even if they met their graduation requirements, because they're still in the flight program until they turn 21. So this is really frustrating. That definition becomes really frustrating when it comes to our special education kids, because again, we're doing the right thing for those kids, but it ends up reporting this way on the state reports.
Well, how big are the numbers? Is this just not a big enough sampling in some cases? Like at Bonneville High School, it's showing 47, 48%, something like that. But what kind of quantity of students are we looking at in that group?
So yeah, across the board, we're right at 12% special education students.
So I mean, 4 or 5.
Yeah, and one thing that you'll see in this chart that again, it looks like Bonneville's a problem. Bonneville's not a problem. We have a special education program here for students with more significant disabilities, and so those students are going to be the ones that are never going to meet that definition because they're going to again stay here till they're 21 potentially. We're going to definitely modify their IEPs, and so when we put those programs into schools, you're going to see a difference in those outcomes for kids compared to schools where we don't have those programs. Okay. And then males and females, and I don't, again, this is percentage based, and so you can just see very close, but there are some, a little bit of a gap between students on that, so.
I think college is trending the other way.
Yeah.
More girls graduating, guys.
Yep. Yeah. And to your point earlier, Randy, we don't have enough girls graduating from TCHS to attract more boys there, so we've got to do some things to get some girls there.
Yeah, a couple of years ago.
Looks like good odds. If I'm a girl, I'd be going there.
Yeah,
that's right.
One of our girls really excelled in welding there a few years ago.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yep. Yep. There's always some that do just a fantastic job there. So.
Okay, the next item, Scott, are you done with that one?
Yes, unless there's questions from the board.
Any other questions on the graduation rates? Okay, let's go ahead with the proposed policy U4301, bullying, harassment, and intimidation.
Thank you. So typically this would be a fairly brief presentation to the board and just letting you know we've updated this policy, but it's worth taking a few minutes about this. So last spring we had some parents approach us and with some concerns about a bullying situation that their students were involved with and shared some very valid concerns on what we could do better as a district to respond to students in those situations. And so from that, we've been working with those parents and with our high school and middle school administration, also with the children or the students from those families to take a fresh look at our policy and to and at our procedures and talk about what we could do better. So You have the policy before you. This procedure is a synopsis of what the policy is, and in yellow you'll see some of the key things that we changed. A few things that were significant that we changed based on that feedback we had from those is for as long as I've been in a district leadership position, so I don't know how long that is now, 11 or 12 years, I've continually preached to our principals, when you have complaints about bullying, make sure that you're documenting those and giving students the reporting form to report those to you. So I've really harped on that ever since I've come to the district. What our parents helped us think about differently as far as doing things better than that is simply handing a form to a kid and saying, go home and fill that out and bring it back. You may not have adequately addressed what really happened and haven't shown enough support for those students. And so we've kept that form in place, but we also created in Laserfish a form where principals would now start documenting how they're responding to the student. And we're not relying necessarily on that form to be the stopping point of the investigation. So even if that form never comes back, we've got a process and procedure to continue investigating and supporting the situation. So that's one key difference. And then another key thing, and this really started with Title IX training is last year as we were headed the new regulations about Title IX. And when I heard it, I just thought, man, I missed the boat on this as an administrator, and that is when students come and report these things to us, we need to make sure that we are offering supportive measures to those kids that have been the victims of these. Typically, again, I would just take that report and think, okay, here's a discipline issue I need to deal with, and I would focus on the discipline side, and I never did enough as a principal or assistant principal to think about what can we do to make sure we're supporting the kids that have been through a traumatic experience. And so that's a key part of the policy and procedure now as well. And then just making sure that we are documenting what happens through that Laserfish form, and then if there is disciplinary action, that we're documenting that either in students' files, if it's a student that's initiated it, or employees' files if they have. And then finally, and this again was a key thing that was shared from us from the parents and from their students, is to follow up with them and let them know we can never disclose the specifics of what we've done, but let them know we have investigated, we have taken action, and making sure that those supportive measures we've identified have been helpful. So with that, if you're okay, I'd like to welcome a few parents that have helped us work through that. Also, Laura Wallace is one of those, and Mary Wilding is another one, and Mary brought her daughter, who's been helpful as we work through those conversations this year. But they've been exceptionally helpful in helping us get this policy updated, and I think it'll be much more responsive to kids.
So thank you for listening to me after my members of the board. I want to introduce myself. I'm Laura Wallace.
And I've thought a lot about what I wanted to tell you tonight. I mean, as a parent coming to the table here, obviously there's a lot of logical reasons I'm here and there's a lot of emotional reasons I'm here. But after I thought about it, what I think you probably wanted to know is what problem were we trying to solve? And what steps did we take to get to the resolution that you see in the policy before you? So I'm going to start by telling you that I showed up at the table after I got a text from my daughter that she had been attacked on campus. And not a text any parent ever wants to get. And when I started asking more questions, I found out it wasn't the first time. In fact, this specific individual had been attacking her verbally and with objects, getting in her space, throwing things at her, intimidating her, and it had been going on most of the year. But this person hadn't just been doing this to my daughter. It had happened to many students over a long period of time. And when we started asking questions like, you know, the mom face, like how did we get here? It was that every student who had been attacked was taking this information to the trusted adult they had. But that wasn't the same person every time. So each time that trusted adult was looking at the situation from the little part they knew and addressing it and doing a great job of addressing it for what they knew. But there was no central reporting system for anyone to know that these attacks had been happening over and over and over again to multiple different students in multiple different places and in multiple different situations. So every one was handled as a one-off. And by the time my daughter got attacked, she knew of multiple other kids who had been attacked by the same kid. And her attitude was, this stops now. And when your child texts you and says, this stops now, Mom, get down here, you get down here. And so we started looking at it, and what we determined when we started having conversations where there other parents started coming forward and saying, you know, my kid experienced this. Well, my kid experienced this. And it wasn't one school, it wasn't one group of kids, it wasn't one location on campus. This was a system-wide issue that was going to need a district response and a district change. One of the things we heard from families and from our kids, because we started looping them in ways they were comfortable immediately, was it changes. Like, this adult will say this and this adult will say this, and I don't know when I'm safe to tell you this or when this is going to happen. We don't know what's going on. And we were very concerned that we didn't have a consistent district-wide approach to what was happening. We kept hearing words like best practices. Well, it's best practices to do this. I would like you to point to the best practices. Like, how do I as a parent or as a child know what a best practice is? And if it's best today, is it best tomorrow? And how do I know when it changes? We needed it written down. So we were really impressed that the district leadership listened. We said, this has got to change, and we're willing to sit here as a solution with you. So Superintendent Wolstenhume pulled us together. We had teens, we had parents, we had administrators from each of the middle and high schools, along with the district leadership team. And we sat together, we started meeting in June, and we started addressing the concerns. So he brought up a point about the form. What parents comment on that form was, you're asking children to use an adult form to engage in adult process. You're not meeting them where they are. And so the very first thing that was done is the Get Help app rolled out. We started being able to report from multiple different places. The kids were able to start messaging from their phones and saying, hey, we got a problem here. And that meant that sometimes the responses were immediate and sometimes we could circle back, but it was all being monitored and it was going to a central place. Not only were our administrators seeing it, but our district was as well. So patterns started to be more obvious that way. So I have a couple mottos in life, and one of them is do what you say and say what you do. And the policy that exists currently, which I believe is 3295, doesn't do that. Our teens told us, I'm not going to tell you something that makes me vulnerable if I don't know what you're going to do with that information. Are you going to call my mom? Are you going to yell at the kid and say, well, Susie Q said you did ... I'm not going to make myself more vulnerable so that I can tell you. I would rather get bullied, harassed, and attacked than to have an adult be the reason I'm getting bullied, harassed, and attacked. And so they just basically said, if we're not sure we're going to be safe, we're not going to tell you what's going on, which was yet another reason that my daughter had got attacked after many other attacks, because some of those kids had not said anything. They didn't feel safe saying something. So then we heard from staff and they said, okay, well, I hear that you're going to be making this policy a little more clear, but what about false reports? Because if we make it easier to report, aren't you going to make it easier to make stuff up and report it? And so we had to balance making sure that we were getting good data about events from our children with making sure that we were protecting our staff and our parents and frankly the other students from getting revenge reports. I mean, that's never happened ever. Anyway, so my second motto in my life is a high tide floats all boats. That means to me that if we do something good, it needs to be good for everybody and it needs to make it better for everyone, which means we needed to make this policy work for our kids, for our parents, and for our administration, our teachers, our staff. Everyone involved had to have something that made it better. So I think the policy that you have before you is that attempt to make it so that every voice is heard. We need trust that when I say something, you're going to do something with it that keeps me safe if we're ever going to get on top of this bullying, harassment, and intimidation policy. So as a group, we dug in, we got curious, we started finding out what was going on, and we realized that the policy that currently exists hasn't been reviewed in 5 years, and it is no longer current with existing state and federal statutes that we need to be in compliance with. That includes Idaho Code, and it also includes federal legislation that governs education, and Title IX rules as well. We needed to make sure that we were compliant there. So we did that. And we also pulled data from studies that pull, obviously bullying and violence and suicidality and their relationship to make sure we were kind of attacking that. This document that you have in front of you, it combines the ideas of students and parents and teachers and administration. It also, of course, includes those current laws and the values that we have as a community that we want to fix this. So obviously no policy is going to stop bullying, harassment, and intimidation. A piece of paper can't stop it. But what this policy does do is put us all on the same page. It gives us definitions so that we all know what we're talking about when we say bullying, harassment, and intimidation. We know how the reports are going to be made, who they're going to go to. We know what we're going to do to keep our victims safe and to make sure that they are circled back with and they feel that they have been heard. We also talk about how we're going to investigate and report, how we're going to be transparent. That means transparency with the board, that we have bullying issues in schools or in groups of kids. It also means transparency with our public and the State Department of Education per Idaho Code. And it also allows us to gather data so that we can identify the problems that we have to solve. And that is good for all of us. That is, in fact, a high tide floating our boat. So I want to just point out that we had teens who were very, very, very intimately involved in these changes. This isn't a bunch of adults who got together and decided what should be best for our kids. These were our kids funneling information to us, telling us, and sitting in the committees meetings. And by the way, per the teens, adults have boring meetings. So I'm very grateful to the district for how incredibly dedicated they were to listening to us, even when it wasn't easy. My daughter feels heard now, and she knows that steps are being taken, so this isn't going to happen to somebody else. Obviously, can't stop it, but it won't happen this way. And I want to make sure you understand that this policy reflects dozens of students on those pages. It's the voices and experiences of dozens of staff and parents as well, and it is the collective knowledge which makes that policy so strong. So I do hope that when you look at it, you ask questions. I'm always happy to answer anything that you have, but that you know that it was well thought out, it was collaborative, and we are very grateful that we were given the opportunity to be at the table together to write this. If you have any questions, please let me know.
You know, I read through a lot, I think most of the pages. Well, a couple of things. Is it your opinion, if you don't know of a chronic situation, that you'd first try to resolve it with the child and their parent?
What do you, I'm sorry, I'm not sure. Do I know a specific child in a specific situation or a school?
If there is a bullying, as far as you knew, it was one-on-one, still notify the school, say, I don't want to do anything with it, but I just want it on record that this has happened. But then do you feel like it's still the best outcome for the children if the two parents and the children, the parents of both, get together and say, do we have a problem here? Is this something we can resolve, or do we need to go past this?
Well, one of the things I like about the policy, to answer your question, is that we can report, and it was very important to the students that they be able to report without having their parents sign the report to begin with. Like, they could turn in information. They didn't have to get an adult to say, yeah, I agree that you have a problem. You know, just the fact they said it is enough to say we have a problem. But not every report is worthy of, you know, of a big, huge investigation. If we have, for example, you know, someone keeps stealing my pencil, do we need to, you know, shut down the school and investigate the pencil theft? Probably not. But if we have 5 kids who say, gosh, my pencil keeps getting swiped, you know, where's it going? Then now we have a pattern to look at. And if a parent says, you know what, I am concerned, my kid keeps coming home and saying they're getting shoved in the hallway after second hour. Can you take a peek at those cameras? Oh gosh, we have an awful lot of kids coming out of classes at the exact same moment. It doesn't look like it's targeted, too many humans in the same spot. I mean, it gives us data to start looking at to see if we can resolve the problem. Oh, we have that hallway's tight. Let's make sure we are doing everything we can to not have obstructions in the hall or to move through. But I think our biggest problem to date is that we weren't catching patterns, and there was no way to report without this huge form, with this big signature, with this big scary thing. And now I can report, a kid can report, and just say, I want you to know, I saw this. I don't know what it means, but I saw it. And now it allows them to feel like they've spoken up.
You know, this school, I think, opened in '78, and a lot of this wasn't here. And it was just past the principal's office, there was a hallway. And a lot of the should we say athletes, guy athletes would line up there, and when particular girls would walk by that didn't meet their definition, they would make it like a cow sound or a pig sound.
Classic.
That to me is more devastating in a lot of ways. Some of those already girls suffer from self-esteem. It's hard to apply this to all cases. I thought it was a good attempt.
Now that girl could pull out her phone, hit the Guilt Help app, say, 12:52, this is happening, bing. It would shoot to the administrator who could pull the cameras and go, oop, those are the 5 guys who are making cow sounds at her. And she would at least know that she wasn't alone anymore in that. And if it needed to stop, she could say, I need this to stop.
And then another question, thanks for answering that one. That's great, that's in there. I think we have, and it says gender, age, and maturity. Because a 3rd grader doesn't get picked to be on the kickball team, goes in and tells teacher they're being mean to me. Mm-hmm. You know, and in a way you could say that is. In junior high and high school, for the teacher's responsibility, because they can be put on probation or terminated if they do not act or proceed, it seems to me, and with sexual harassment cases, that's where, if they're mature age, you say, now, let me just clarify what you've just told me, because this is important. And say, now, tell me that again, and be very specific. Because sometimes it's just in passing, and then they go tell their parents, well, I told my teacher. So somewhere that's got to, we got to make a connection that, yes, I'm just not saying off cuff, this happened, I need help.
Right, and I think it allows administration to circle back with the kids and say, hey, you know what, we got a report that you didn't get picked for the team and you think there's a good reason, to use your example. And, you know, can you walk me through it? And then it's easier to determine if the further conversation is needed. But it also, this policy allows the administrator to say, this is what I'm going to do right now. Do you feel good about that? Do you think there's anything missing? Do you feel that more needs to be done? And it allows that open conversation. And I think you bring up a good point to the maturity and ability of our students. We very specifically put in language there to acknowledge that we have students with disabilities whose regular behavior might not be okay to somebody else, but that needs to be taken into consideration. Was it intentional, or was it part of their disability? And so that is something that is acknowledged, that's where they're different, in a different place than maybe the kid who's standing next to them in their capabilities and their understanding, and to work with them where they are. Our teens kept saying, nothing ever gets done, it doesn't matter what we tell you anyway. You're either going to get us in trouble or do nothing. Those are the options. And so by adding that to the policy and the procedure, that we circle back and say, okay, we did an investigation. We identified all 12 kids that were in the videotape. We've talked to them and their parents, and we are working through making sure that you are safe. Is there anything more we can do? That changes everything for our victims.
I didn't see this in there, but I think it's inferred. Transportation would be included in it.
Yes, it is listed on locations that are considered covered in the policy, including, I believe, bus stops, buses, transportation, off-site activities, sporting events, wherever they are.
Then the other vague one was, but it has to be vague because we don't want to. It's like they were discussing if a 1st grader brings a knife to school, they had automatic expulsion. And they've changed that, but here's my point, was when someone does make that claim, lost my train of thought. I just think with the teaching side, and I'm trying to think where I was, forgive me.
Well, I'm gonna something you said.
Go ahead.
Information. So the next step in this process, we're not done. I mean, when we looked at this policy, we realized this policy touches many other district policies that need to be updated to, once this is approved, to be consistent with our language. One of the things that will be touched is the student code of conduct, to make sure that what we are saying here is reflected there, and obviously all the other places that it impacts. But we're aware that the code of conduct needs to be looked at as well, to make sure we're consistent in our language and our use and our intent. But we felt that I think one of the most important things about passing this updated policy and approving it is that our teens came to us and said, what you have doesn't work. We're willing to tell you what will work. Here you go. And when we have engagement from our student population, willing to work, once again, an adult process to get the results that they know are needed, I think we owe it to them in a large capacity to listen, to consider, and to the best ability of that we have to approve what they're telling us they need to feel safe at school. We can't wonder why they don't engage if we've never let them engage.
I remember my question. It was related to internet and social platforms.
That is covered.
It specifies that it has to be on school server, I guess, through school server. There was 3 different classifications.
If it impacts the ability to learn at school is also covered, and that is intentional so that if you are being harassed, for example, on a social media platform at home, but it's being done to target you at school, or it's impacting your ability to access your education because you are such a mess, or you feel threatened, or the anxiety, or whatever your reason is, then it falls under this policy because you have been targeted by people who are trying to do this to you at school.
So you see effective learning as just one person in this case?
What do you mean?
That if it's private, and go ahead.
Is that what you're saying? In other words, if just one person is effective,
if it's just one person,
that's enough to
enough to trigger all this?
If it is, I mean,
and I think
once we are aware of it, yes, that one person is enough, because one person can be bullied here or in virtually, and it's still an issue. And I think we all know, I mean, all we have to do is look at the headlines to know how quickly that spills into our school, and it's not just one kid anymore.
Right, but sometimes, let's say, there always seemed to be some girl that thought it was her responsibility to tell every girl her age group what they could wear, who they could like, et cetera, et cetera. If that's happening at home, both of their homes, and they're just texting back and forth, that's a whole different world than what we saw happen earlier.
Right, but if the kids show up at school and everyone's got it on their phone and they're looking at the, who's hot and who's not list,
then it changes. If it's gone past them too, but if them two are having a conversation about some boy and they're in a tiff and one gets pretty aggressive, does that at that point say that girl's learning now and it triggers it?
It could. It depends on the situation. And I think the policy is open enough that if the girl says, look, this person is doing this and I can't sit next to them in class because I am shaking now because I am so worried about the next thing that's going to happen, then this gives us the latitude to have a conversation. Hey, did you know your words are hurting? Did you know this is happening? Yeah, well, I don't like her. Okay, well, then this policy would allow us to go through the process, figure out what's appropriate. And if you notice, there are no real absolutes about what's going to happen. It's including but not limited to, and it refers back to that student code of conduct, which we're hoping to make consistent with this language so that we have a continuum. It's not a one and done. It is, let's teach. We are a school, we're a learning environment. How can we teach our children to be respectful and be kind and to be who we want them to be in our community, good citizens? And that this policy helps us do that while keeping our kids safe on the victim side.
Randy, if you don't mind if I could just follow up with you just to make sure I'm tracking it. Are you kind of, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, I'm just trying to make sure I'm tracking the conversation. Are you worried that it might be too many resources of school resources that are devoted to solving problems outside the school? Is that
right? If two girls are texting or two guys, and it's not violent, but it's hurtful.
Yeah.
There's got to be that. I guess they can approach someone and ask. I think the greatest thing of this is the notification. We saw this, and I'm not equating children to terrorism, but all of our government entities never talked.
Yeah.
So they never knew who was on that list.
Right.
And I think if you have it from the athletic department, the school bus, it'll come and make itself pretty aware. And then the last one was the verbiage about the kingmaker in this. They called it power position, power something.
So bullying, the definition of bullying on the federal level is includes the term that there is a difference in power, perceived or actual, between the person doing it and the person receiving it. So if you and I are best buddies on the playground and I'm like, dude, I don't like your shoes, And you're like, yeah, I don't like them either. That's not bullying, because we're friends, we said something, whatever. But if I am the captain of the football team and I walk up to you and you go, those are the ugliest shoes I've ever seen, and you want to be a football player, now we have an imbalance of power. And you're like, oh, I did something I don't like, and that's on the federal level, that's the definition of bullying.
But there's a lot of bullies who are smaller.
Oh, sure, that's a discrepancy in power too.
And they don't have any credentials to themselves, perhaps other than people just know he's a tough guy. So I mean, it doesn't apply in all cases, but it's a good general direction.
Right, you could be the small kid and be the bully, and the big kid be the victim because, hey, maybe this guy thinks you're stupid, and so he says, you're not nearly as smart, and so now you feel like you're less than, because the point is the policy is big enough to accommodate all of those different dynamics without having to list everyone. We could spend the rest of our lives and never list everyone.
Absolutely.
And so that's why we wrote that policy, and we used heavily the language that has been developed on the federal side, because obviously it's with the school side, they do a lot of this, but we felt that the language was very, very informative, but also very forgiving of us going, well, does it fit? Does it not fit? No, these two kids have, a perceived imbalance of power is all it takes.
So this, what you've done here is great, and you're comfortable with this to move forward and try it. Well, I'm sure it changes over time because our society keeps changing.
I hope that it continues to be revisited as our society changes, but I am just really excited that we have reached a stage where our teenagers trust us enough to bring this to us and believe that we're going to do something about it, because they could have just packed up their marbles and gone home, but they continued to engage in the conversation. We got lots of eye rolls. We got a lot of, I don't know what they're going to do with this, but we also got a lot of, no. Superintendent will tell you, my daughter more than once spoke up in those meetings and said, no, you're just wrong. Because that's how, she's like, no, that's just no. And I was actually very proud of her, because that is a perceived imbalance of power, to be a teenager in a room full of principals and district leaders and to say, nope. I was touched that she's there.
I guess this, I didn't read in there. Do we have a central database for this? I guess it starts probably in junior high. Does it start to follow them at that age?
And I'd say that's what we've lacked over the years. And when our reporting system solely relied on that paper form, the principals, when they were completing it, were just keeping in a 3-ring binder in their office. It wasn't a good system. So now we have multiple levels for that reporting. One starts with that app that we put out there. That's not the only way students are reporting, but that's one level of report that's completely independent of any administrator. We'll have that data saying, here's how many were reported from students or from teachers through that system. And then the second level is, now that we have that instant reporting investigation form in Laserfish, we've got reporting on that side of it as well. So we'll have a much better accountability and reporting, and really know how we're doing in responding to these issues.
And what he speaks to is trust. We've talked a couple times about the things that, we think we're building a policy about bullying, harassment, intimidation. No, we're building a policy of trust. If our students trust us, if our parents trust us, if our staff trusts us, if the people who are on campus trust that we will do what we say we're going to do, then the ability to reduce the things we don't want to see, attacks on kids, verbally, physically, whatever, it's going to reduce, because everyone trusts that the policy is going to happen and it's going to work. And the Get Help app, if your kid comes home from school and says, Mom, this happened, you can put it in the app and report it, and the next morning you're going to get a phone call, if not that night, depending on the situation. And that means, as a parent, I trust that you saw my kid, you saw my concern, and you're going to handle it. I'm a much more engaged parent now, because I know that that you did what you said you were going to do. And we all want that.
So the school's commitment is to start an investigation, if it's legit, by the end of the second day and complete it within 10 days? Is that what I read?
Yeah, barring unusual circumstances. Obviously, if we're gone for Christmas break, or, it's during school periods of time, or, unless there is some incredibly extraordinary circumstance, it has to happen immediately, and there has to be follow-up, which means me as a parent, I know when I need to call you and say, hey, I haven't heard anything. And they're like, nope, we have 2 more days, we're almost done. Oh, thanks. As opposed to, it's been 3 months, what's happening? And I think that that helps parents also take a deep breath because they know where they fit in the process. The students do as well. And I think one of the other things that's important to notice in this policy, it says third parties. That is our fancy term for everyone who isn't a student or an employee of the district. And that means that our behavior on campus and at school events, it all falls under this. That means if we have someone go, off on a student or a staff member, that we have a policy that tells us what we're going to do about it. And that is important for everybody to be consistent. Our community needs to be just as consistent as we are at school activities and buildings.
This has been a great discussion, and I applaud you for being involved, and the other parents and the students, and thanks to Dr. Wilson-Hume for taking the time to bringing them together. And I think this is awesome, and this is what this district is all about, is involving the parents, and the app is awesome, and I think that's really improved the process. So thank you so much.
And as I said, if you
have
any questions over the next month while you're looking at it, please feel free to reach out.
Great, thank you. So Dr. Wilson-Hume, this is on the 30-day review, so we have...
It's for initial consideration, so no action, just for the board to review.
Okay.
We can have a follow-up discussion in the work session if there's other questions like we had tonight, and then it'll be for 30-day review in our March meeting.
Okay, so the questions were excellent, and appreciate, again, the participation. Let's move on to the next item, Dr. Wilson-Hume, proposed policy.
Yep. So tonight we would recommend that the board adopt policy 1510, board agenda items for final adoption. We presented this to the board in a work session. Didn't need nearly the involvement on this that we had on the previous policy, and we just want to basically have the flexibility to on how we organize the agenda for the board.
Okay, so that is an action item, so. I so move. Okay. Been moved by Paul, by Mr. Jenkins, and seconded by Greg Calder. Is that right, Greg?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Very good, motion carries. Okay, now let's go ahead and invite Heath Jackson. Where are you at, Heath? Oh, over there. Discuss the Hillcrest School Principal recommendation.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to bring a recommendation tonight to the school board. Got a little bit of mixed feelings about the process. Scott Miller, as he's leaving the district in retirement, I just want to share my appreciation publicly for Scott and what he means to the district. Obviously change brings about good opportunities, but Scott's been a great mentor to many in the district. He took a chance on me 15 years ago as an assistant principal, and I just really appreciate Scott and thank him for the service and time in the district. And with the end of his tenure as the principal at Hillcrest High School, we have the opportunity to bring tonight a recommendation for the principal to succeed Scott in his position.
Can we give Scott a hand? Scott, thank you so much. Yeah. There was an item, Scott, on the agenda earlier that indicated that somebody had decided not to retire, and I was hoping that would be you, but it wasn't, so. Nope.
We're pretty sure he's going to show up to work tomorrow. So.
Well, we got to get that Hillcrest boys basketball team to win the state tournament.
With Scott's announcement of his retirement, we immediately started a search for a replacement for principal at Hillcrest High School. We opened that right after Christmas break. We had a number of candidates. We had 12 candidates who applied. That's fairly typical for this type of a job. Being a high school principal is hard. There's a lot of tasks that are put before you, and it's a difficult job. And so as we reviewed candidates, we identified 5 candidates that we wanted to bring in for interviews, and on Monday of this week we formed a committee. That committee included teachers from Hillcrest High School, a counselor from Hillcrest High School, one of the assistant principals from Hillcrest, 2 parents from the community, and then some additional people, myself, Ken Marlowe is the director in the district, and Doug McLaren, who's currently serving as the principal at Thunder Ridge High School. And so we had a well-represented committee to interview 5 candidates who brought a lot of different experiences, different opportunities that they've had to serve in education, and put a difficult challenge before us to select the next principal. That committee made a recommendation of 2 candidates out of those 5 who were then interviewed for a second interview by Dr. Wolstenhume, myself, Jason Lords, and Guy Wangsgard. And tonight we would like to recommend to the school board to approve Ty Salisbury as the new principal at Hillcrest High School at the end of this school year and moving into next year.
Okay. This is an action item.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I move that we accept the recommendation of Ty Salisbury to become the principal of Hillcrest High School.
I second.
Been moved by Paul Jenkins that Ty Salisbury be confirmed as the new principal, seconded by Carissa Coates. Is there any discussion on that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Is Ty here? Where is he?
Ty is here. Come on up, Ty, and keep it short.
It's a great day to be a knight.
Congratulations, Ty. And again, Scott, thank you for all of your hard work, and look forward to being a knight for the rest of the year.
But who's counting?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. John Pym, Alturas Charter School and Bonneville Joint School District Memorandum of Understanding.
You may recall just recently we did one of these memorandum of understanding with the White Pine Charter facilities in case of an emergency situation. Alturas has now occupied what was formerly the Sears and Roebuck building in the Grand Teton Mall. The proximity to the Campbell Gymnasium is pretty close. It makes a lot of sense that we create this memorandum of understanding with them. So in case of emergency, they could bring their students over to the Campbell Gym, or if we ran into a situation, we could take our flight kids over to Alturas to shelter. So that's what's before you and what is proposed.
Is it limited to the Campbell Gym, or could they use the Hillcrest High School, which is close?
I believe actually the memorandum does not specifically say Campbell Gym, but Campbell Gym is what they feel like would accommodate their needs and is the closest spot. So,
do we know about how many students Alturas has at the Sears location?
I'm not totally sure of their enrollment right now.
Either, but okay. I don't think it's huge, but it's it's okay.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I so move.
Okay, moved by Greg Calder, seconded by Randy Smith. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thanks, John. Okay, I'll invite Ken Marlowe up to discuss removal of policy 3290, sexual harassment, from the board policy manual.
Chairman Dance and School Board, at this time we'd like to make a motion to remove policy 3290, which addresses the sexual harassment and intimidation of students. And the reason we can do that is because of a policy that has recently been accepted, 3085, that has to do with sexual harassment in Title IX. Those are well addressed in that one, and it's been streamlined a lot through the hard work of Dr. Wolstenhume, some of the other administrators, our parent committee. Laura Wallace was very instrumental in helping kind of consolidate some of the verbiage and stuff so that it was succinct throughout our policies. and procedures.
Very good. Do we have a motion to accept Ken's recommendation?
So move.
I'll second.
Okay, we've got motion by Greg Calder, seconded by Carissa Coates. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, you're still on, Ken.
Yes. Secondly, we have policy 5250 that addresses sexual harassment, sexual intimidation in the workplace. This as well is covered in the consolidation of the latest, 3085 sexual harassment in the Title IX, but it also is addressed pretty significantly in the proposed policy U 4301 that Dr. Wollstone-Hume spoke to earlier this evening as well. And so in light of those and the policies that have already been accepted, we would motion that we eliminate policy 5250.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I move that we accept the recommendation.
Okay.
Second.
Moved by Greg Calder, second by Paul Jenkins. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Okay, Heath, you're on present to the board policy 5435, Wellness and Benefits Committee for a 30-day review.
Yeah, so tonight I'm presenting some minor changes to the policy for wellness and benefits. Particularly, this is known throughout the district as the insurance committee. This is the committee that reviews each year the insurance that's provided by the school district, looks at other options, and weighs the costs and benefits of providing the insurance package for our employees. A couple minor changes. You'll see them in red and crossed in blue. Shifting the Human Resource Director to serve as the chairperson of the Wellness and Benefits Committee instead of the Executive Secretary. And then down at the bottom, adding that the Human Resource Benefits Manager will serve as the Executive Secretary. As long as I've been part of this committee, which is about 8 or 9 years, and going back and looking in past years, the Human Resource Director has served as the chairperson of this committee, and the Benefits Manager has served as the Executive Secretary. And primarily, it's a matter of time. We have the resources, the availability, the time to meet with our insurance brokers, to gather information, to set appointments with new carriers, gather all that information and take it to the committee and share that information. And so we're asking the board to approve this action on a 30-day review. We have talked about this with the insurance committee and addressed it with the BEA. Everything else in the policy stays intact, but just identifying that chairperson will continue to be that HR director, rather than as on number 3 it says that the insurance committee will select a chairperson every 3 years. It's really a matter of simplifying and ensuring that the person who's in that position has the availability and the resources to research and find the information that's out there and then present to the committee. Are there any questions about the recommended change?
So this is 30-day review. We'll actually approve the policy
next month.
Next month.
Correct.
Okay, do you have a motion to?
I so move.
Okay. Moved by Greg Calder.
I second.
Second by Carissa Coates. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Heath.
The second policy tonight is the bereavement leave. This particularly impacts classified employees and administrative staff. And this simply aligns our bereavement leave to the master agreement for certified educators. So the language that I have recommended and made changes for on this policy 5402 is the exact language that's been approved by the school board for the teacher's master agreement. Prior to this language, you'll notice that the classified staff and administrative staff actually received more days than the certified staff, simply because we didn't differentiate between immediate family and extended family. So that's the primary change, identifying who's immediate family and who's extended family, and outlining that an employee will receive 5 days for immediate family and 3 days of bereavement leave for extended family. And then down at the bottom, we've identified immediate family and extended family, and that language comes exactly from the master agreement. And so it's just aligning those two policies so that we don't have differing expectations or opportunities or needs for different groups of people, and those two policies in the master agreement will match and be aligned.
Any questions for Heath on that one? Okay, do we have a motion?
I so move.
Moved by Carissa Coates. Second by Paul Jenkins. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries.
We should just nominate.
Okay, we're on G, parcels for possible surplus. Heath, you're back up.
So in interest of time, we'll share some information briefly and probably add this to an upcoming work session to go into details a little bit more. And then I just want to share appreciation to John. He's worked to find some numbers to identify potential price ranges and what we might be looking at. So we've identified kind of 3 different areas of what our properties are. And so the first section we've identified just as planned properties. And so the first is the Red Rock. I think my pointer won't show on there. Red Rock subdivision. So this is just off of, you can see Beach's Corners just a little bit below that yellow square. That's the future site of what hopefully will be an elementary school. It's right in the Red Rock subdivision off of Telford and off of Ammon Road. We talked about this property. I think, Randy, you mentioned there's a canal that runs right along adjacent to that.
That's one we were talking about.
That
Randy,
view's looking
last.
south. So on the bottom of the screen, that's 49th North. The district office is right there, kind of to the right, and you see you got Ammon Road forming the right-hand border and Crowley Road forming the left-hand border.
Yeah, I think that's Haynes' home right there on that canal bank.
Yeah, it is. Okay. So this is, and Scott, I can't read the numbers very well, so if you want to share numbers.
Yeah, so that's a 14.5 acre site. We actually, that's not the original piece that we owned there. The original piece was just south of that. We traded that with Jay Johnson in 2018, and so all we have is an estimated price. I didn't go back to the original purchase price, but it was estimated at $16,500 an acre when we did that trade for those pieces. So the trade was super helpful to us because now we had frontage on 49th North, much better access for both parent drop-off and for a bus. And that is certainly a planned elementary site and most likely our next elementary school site.
Definitely helps to resolve the concern of that I own a corridor, I own a road, and the growth that we're seeing there. So,
seems like that one we have some small-ish commitment about some historical marker or something there, right? Am I remembering that right?
Flag box property.
Yep. Thank you.
Wasn't it down the street though?
It's not on our property.
Oh yeah. They already removed it, didn't they, when they put that subdivision in?
I don't think it's even there anymore. I don't know, it might be. Yeah.
The next piece of parcel land for planned property is the Woodland Hills piece. So you can see I believe this is Woodland Hills Elementary.
It's up above.
Right here. So this is south of Woodland Hills Elementary.
To keep you on your toes, that one's now flipped and looking northward. So,
yeah.
So we've got 65th South is running on the southern border of that property. 49th North is up on between Woodland Hills Elementary and the subdivision that's Woodland Hills and Cortland Ridge.
And I apologize, these TV screens aren't meant to be read from the side, so I can't hardly see what it even looks like. So Woodland Hills, there's several developments, and next month one of the board reports is the development and new potential construction that's happening in the district. And we do know there's significant talk right now, just directly west of Woodland Hills Elementary, a fairly large subdivision that's in the process of being planned, and then everything between where that school property is and the back of Woodland Hills. We know that's a Rockwell area that's going to be developed very quickly. So again, an area that we feel like as a district we would recommend potentially a new elementary school on that site at a very more likely sooner than later, and probably a piece of land that we'd recommend holding on to for the time being. The next section's off 52nd. There's two pieces of land in that area. The piece of land on the top is the Black Canyon section of land where there's excess land at Black Canyon, large enough to build an elementary school. And then just down the road on 52nd is what's referred to oftentimes as the Fred Adams land. Again, I can't see the dates of when those pieces of land were purchased and original pricing. Right now, the recommendation from the district and the conversation we'd like to continue to have is it's probably in our benefit to hold on to these properties until we have a better idea of what's going to happen with that future development. Right now, that future development includes this entire piece. There's pretty much follow the canal all the way to First Street. There's a proposal of a developer. Right now, the plans call for 3,200 homes in that area. It's still in the developing phase and has to have a lot of approval. What we do know is the land is owned, and at some point there'll be homes there. How many homes, we don't know at this point. And so our initial conversations are those are two pieces of land that would be valuable for the district to potentially trade as that development comes in. The initial development that we've seen has land within the neighborhoods to build schools. And when we met with them, it's probably been five months ago or so now, they expressed some interest in setting aside land and working with the district to purchase or trade land. So we would recommend holding on to that land for the time being until we know more about what's happening in that area. And both of those pieces of property become potentially good bargaining chips as we recognize growth in that area. And then I believe that's the same area. And then the last one is the Kinghorn property. That's the land that the district and the board approved a few months ago for the high schools. There's been some scrutiny of whether or not that's the best option. We should be purchasing land for potential use in 15, 20 years, 25 years, or if we should be purchasing land when it's more timely and more at the time that we're looking to build a school. So I think that would be a good conversation to have at an upcoming work session to determine that. But what we do know from Thunder Ridge is we paid a significantly higher amount of money for that land when we waited until we needed the land rather than having the land available to us.
Is that north of Yukon? Is that what we're seeing?
So that view is looking south again. Just keep on your toes. So Yukon's down here in the northwest corner, and then that's
It's actually south and a little west of Yukon, Randy.
So that's almost, the one above that is 81st?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The northern line is 90. No, gotta remember. Yeah, it's 81st. Yep.
So those are the pieces of property that, as we continue to have conversations, that we feel like there's a planned purpose for that land, and probably something we should discuss as far as should we continue to hold land, and is that the right thing for the district to do, and is it the prudent thing for the district to do? And right now, our initial thoughts and conversations is those are the pieces that we would recommend that we continue to hold on to. So then we have the unplanned property. The first is Timberline Estates. This is out in the Fairview area. If you're familiar with Timberline Estates, it's I believe it's a completed subdivision. They've completed the lots that are available in there, and our property actually butts right up into that neighborhood, Timberline Estates. And so there has been some interest. I know John's shared with the board that there's been at least one developer that's reached out and would like to expand Timberline Estates and potentially add on to that subdivision and be able to expand the homes there. One of the things we've had conversation about is that particular property is almost right in the center of Fairview Elementary and Yukon. It's a little bit closer to Fairview than Yukon. And so as we see that potential growth going out to the north of the district, we do have the ability at Fairview Elementary. There's some excess land there that might provide opportunities to expand or build a new school on site at Fairview. And then we also have Yukon Elementary. And so it's a fairly good location to have the two schools split apart, and not likely that there'll be a need in the near future for a additional elementary school in that location.
That's just north of the Kinghorn.
It is, yep. Yeah, the Kinghorn piece is that square property just above it and to the right.
Okay.
John's worked and received some potential estimates. I don't know if you can see those. Scott, if you can read those.
Yeah, so we're looking at an estimate of $35,000 per acre as, and again, not a full assessment, but just some estimates provided by super helpful realtors.
So this particular piece of property potentially has a value of about $875,000 if you find the right buyer and the potential development of that property. So that's definitely one that we would put on the table as not necessarily a planned purpose in the near future, and conversations about what we should do with this land. The second piece is the Hit Road property. This is near Costco, very commercial area. It's a smaller location. I believe it's about 12 acres. This is a property that the district has owned, and there was some conversation at one time about a potential transportation barn. It's across the street, or nearly across the street, from our maintenance child nutrition warehouse. And so there's been some discussion in the past about expanding with our support services staff in that location. As we've had continued conversations about transportation, and we recognize how busy Hit Road's become with opening the Costco and that thoroughway into our community, we don't feel like it's the right location for a transportation hub if we get to that point. Trying to get buses across 5 lanes and pulling outs, probably not the best idea and option. So we do feel like there is some value in this property because of the commercial area. The total price that I have for the acreage is upwards of $900,000. Scott, I can't read what the per acre price is.
$75,000 per acre.
So that's probably the most valuable piece of property that we don't have a immediate planned purpose for in the district right now.
Does that location make sense to everybody? So Costco is just down here in this bottom corner, and then that green roof is Summit Hills Elementary just above that.
Is that adjacent to mining, zone mining? Do you know?
That gravel pit.
The gravel pit's on the north border.
The gravel pit. There's 2 gravel pits there, Randy. The
right,
one on
and
the
then
corner, and then
it backs up to the sugar. But I wondered if it was M1 out on the zoning.
I don't know what it's on.
I'm not sure.
It's agriculture right now.
But to get that price, the zoning would have to change.
Yeah.
Right, Carissa?
Yeah.
Right. So those are the 2 pieces of property that we've discussed that we feel would be not immediately planned or used or have a purpose, that we have anything in the near future that we're talking about. The other properties that we've...
Keith, could I just, real quick, sorry. Just before we go on, I think it's worth noting that if we did this presentation 2 years ago, there would have been additional properties that we would have talked about. So I think it's important for our public to know that we have surplus property over the past 2 years that we haven't needed. So the acreage across from Mountain Valley Elementary School, that was something honestly of an albatross. It was just a weed patch. We were able to sell that to a developer recently and at actually a profit to the district, for lack of a better term. That acreage out in front of Thunder Ridge, where the frontage is, that we purchased really so we could get an access into there, that would have been something of an albatross for us as well, and we were able to surplus that. So I want to recognize that the board and John Pym, with a lot of his legwork, we've been able to get rid of excess property that we really haven't needed. What we've held on to are pieces that, again, we had tentatively planned that those would be future school sites, or in one case, we've recognized that it's much better as an investment property than it is as a transportation center. So.
The other two pieces of property that we want to talk about is the extra or the excess land at Lincoln High School. There's 6 acres that aren't currently part of Lincoln campus, but are part of the overall property. It's a potential commercial area. It's butts up to the industrial park. Rocky Mountain Cabinets currently leases that part of the property. So it's right behind Rocky Mountain Cabinet off of Ammon Road. So it's right connected with the commercial property. I think the reservations that we have as far as putting that immediately as we should repurpose this land is just making sure that we have a good overall plan of what our future may entail. You heard Mr. Oswald tonight talk about the growing concerns of technical careers and being able to accommodate the growth, accommodate the programs, and this potentially could be a site that we could expand technical careers. Lincoln High School, and then having that excess property to be able to build and construct new buildings or new opportunities for our students. And so I don't know that we're comfortable at this point saying let's immediately go out and see what we can get from this property. But want to keep that out there and continue looking at what our long-term plans are, long-term goals as we look at the 12 and 15-year improvement plans, and then identify if this is something we want to pursue. I believe that property value is about $300,000 to $375,000 is the estimate for that property value for those 6 acres. So potential because of the commercial around it for a higher amount, but we just want to make sure that that's thought through as far as our future opportunities with Lincoln High School and that property and potentially technical careers before we make that recommendation or decision.
Once they took the slide offside the building, that property went way down, didn't it?
What's that?
Once they took the slide, emergency slide off that building?
Yeah. The other piece that we've talked a fair amount over the years, or excuse me, over the last few months is the Campbell Gym. We've talked about what its purpose is, what it's used for. I don't believe right now we have a good estimate. I think it's going to really come down to who's interested and who's the potential buyers. But right now, I don't think we have a good estimate to determine what the value of that is. So that's something we'll continue to work through and see if we can identify what the value of that, and identify whether the value that it has for us as a building and facility is greater than what the value monetarily is for that building. Any questions from the board?
No, good presentation, Heath. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Guy. We'll invite Guy Wainsgard to present his Esser funds presentation to the board.
Thank you, Chairman Dance. Before we get into some of the nitty-gritty of the actual Esser funds, want to just take a few minutes and have you think about a few things. So when I attended elementary school for most of my elementary in Centennial Elementary School in Lewiston, Idaho, up north. When I was in 2nd grade, I was out on the playground and I found a shiny 50-cent piece. I don't think I knew they existed. And so once I learned what it was, I was pretty excited because I had found some new money. I don't remember what I spent it on, but I remember I was pretty excited as a 2nd grader that I had 50 cents that I could spend.
And it's gone.
And it's gone. Yep, it's gone. I could only spend it one time and it was gone. I would guess that many of you could think of either family members, neighbors, friends, clients, people you work with who, for whatever reason, came across extra money or whatever, and there may be times when people spend it wisely. There may be times when it was spent on things that maybe in your estimation weren't the best use. But again, they only had the opportunity to spend that money one time. Whether it was a large amount or a small amount. So just keep those things in mind, and we'll come back to those a little bit as we go through. So a couple more examples. I want you to think about a District 93 family who has one parent as a teacher in the district, one parent who is a substitute teacher, and have 3 kids, basically living paycheck to paycheck, as many of our employees do. But they're able to afford a few extra things for this family. Their kids are involved in some activities. Then we're going to roll forward 1 year in this example. And in this example, the pandemic hits, the school teacher continues to work online, but the substitute teacher, because we were not in school, is no longer employed. So the income for that family is reduced. Fortunately for them, there is some stimulus money that comes to them, so that they're able to, so they now have a choice. They can continue spending the things that they normally did. They could take that stimulus money, lots of different things they could do with it. If they didn't have the stimulus money, then they're going to have some hard decisions to make, because they're going to have to cut some of the activities. They're going to have to find some way to reduce their normal everyday expenditures. Now we're going to roll forward 1 more year.
One more child.
So a child is born to this family, so that one parent is still at home. One thing I didn't tell you about this family is that they were living in just a 2-bedroom home. And so with the addition of the 4th child, they now need more room. They have some great community members who worked together and donated the funds so that they could make an addition to their home so that they could all fit. But we know as soon as there's an addition to the home, there's going to be more expenditures. Utilities go up, insurance goes up, repairs, lots of things are associated with more square footage. Let's see if we've missed anything. So, I mean, something to think about is, can you think of anybody in the last year who you've talked to who their rent has increased? Several examples. One that I'll use is a friend that very, very similar situation. Their rent went up by $400. They couldn't go to their employer and suddenly say, hey, my rent went up $400 a month. I need $400 more in my paycheck every month. Wish it was that easy, but it doesn't work that way. So they've got some tough decisions to make. So now let's talk about the District 93 family. Because although the example is not exactly, there's some there's a lot of similarities that we want to talk about. So when the pandemic hit, we had some challenges in that there were several state holdbacks, both in fiscal year 20 and in fiscal year 21, that reduced our revenue substantially. So our revenue is close to 90 million. So when I say substantially, it's because when I think of millions of dollars, when I'm comparing it to my personal income, certainly anything with million is substantial. So the state holdback in 21 was approximately 3.5 million. We also had a holdback in fiscal year 20 when the pandemic first hit. Our rent per se has increased because we opened Black Canyon Middle School. And so that added square footage that we're now taking care of, more square footage that we are heating, lighting, so our expenditures have gone up. Another piece was the loss of the emergency levy. The budget that was approved for fiscal year 21 included $2 million of revenue for the emergency levy. That was the first year in, I think, 10 or 15 years when our enrollment did not increase. It actually went down because of all the students who left to go to online or homeschool or outside of District 93. So just like when families lose part of their income, they have to make adjustments. District 93 is in that same situation. Fortunately for us, we've had the stimulus money, the Esser funds, that we've been able to backfill the loss of the emergency levy, the state holdbacks, and the increase in our expenditures due to opening Black Canyon Middle School. If we did not have the stimulus funds, the Esser money, we would already have been making cuts. And so it's very fortunate for us that we have not had to do that yet. And so the question is, at what point will we need to bring our expenditures back in line with expenditures that don't include the Esser funds?
And Guy, isn't it correct that you said 1 year we didn't do the emergency levy because we couldn't, and then the second year we didn't do it because we wanted to give property tax relief?
Exactly, yes, yep. So this isn't exactly how it works, but it seemed to make sense as we're trying to put things into buckets. Some of the money that came to us as Esser funds has very tight strings. So on the left of the screen, you've got the small pot of money, about $3 million, that had some pretty tight strings attached to it. So those are funds that we have to spend on social emotional learning, learning loss, and direct response to COVID. When COVID first came, we bought lots of masks. There was some technology that was purchased. We had to offer paid sick leave to all of our employees. Some of those things, all of that came out of the $3 million. We still have some of that $3 million, and that we'll be spending on the social emotional as well as the learning loss over the next couple of years. But that's not really helping us solve the other problems that we have. So that's just the small pot. So if we look at the larger pot, we've got about 15 million between Esser 1, Esser 2, and Esser 3. Total of 15 million. The strings are much looser. We can, as long as we can find a way to tie it to the pandemic, then the State Department will reimburse those funds. And we haven't had issues getting that kind of reimbursement from the state. So we have until...
Hey, guys, so
yes.
Does the 15 million include the 3 million that we've...
Separate.
That's separate.
So a total of 18.
So we've used almost the 3 million. There's some left, but...
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
How much of the 15 million's left?
Okay, we're almost there. We're almost there.
He's building up to it. It's on the edge.
That looks like your budget, right?
I'm waiting until we get back around to the 50 cents.
Yeah. So because we've had the stimulus, we've been able to continue our programs. We have not seen those cuts. We haven't had to come back to our reality. So before we go on to answer your question, and I want to kind of put that 15 million in perspective, because as I mentioned before, for most of us, when we talk about millions of dollars, it just sounds like a lot of money. And it is a lot of money, and it's very fortunate that we have this. So I want to put this into perspective of one of our teachers who is receiving the average salary of about $50,000 is about an average for all our teachers. So for the teachers who may be listening, that's somebody who's on the career ladder at P3 with a master's degree on the career ladder. And I don't know, Heath or Scott may be able to answer, where would somebody who's on that P3, how many years would they have been teaching at this point?
At least 6, and probably typically 7 or 8 now.
So those are the teachers that we're talking about. If I take that 15 million, so it's a total of 15 million over 4 years. I wish the 15 million was 16 million, because then the math is much easier. So but regardless, we take the 15 million, split it over 4 years, and apply that to a teacher who is making $50,000 a year. That gives them a $2,000 bonus each year for 4 years. So is that helpful to the teacher? Absolutely. Does it solve all of their issues. Absolutely not, but it certainly does help. So that's the same boat that we're in. 15 million doesn't solve all of our issues, but it certainly does help.
And I missed the 4 years until you just said that. That's the, if you will, the time frame that the 15 million is spent over?
Yes, yeah, we have from fiscal year 21 through fiscal year 24 to spend that.
It is allotted each year. We have it now. We have 4 years to spend it.
So the federal government,
oh, they have it.
They allot the money to the state, and then we have to spend it first. We submit a claim to the state, they verify that we spent it appropriately, and then they reimburse us the funds.
That's where it gets a little tricky, doesn't it, Guy? Because we have to spend the money out of our budget.
Yes.
And then ask for reimbursement. So the money is not there to spend. I mean, we have to.
You got to have the money to get the money.
Yeah.
Right.
Apparently, Governor Little didn't access renter reimbursement, and the federal government took it back. Is a possibility they can take that back? Should we be more interested in buying things sooner rather than later before the program is reversed?
So I would say there's all of those possibilities exist. So part of me as somebody running a business has had that same thought, and I would say my safest bet is I'm going to spend all of that money now on things that qualify so that it's done, so that that very thing doesn't happen. I would say the likelihood of that happening is pretty small, although they do continue to update the rules and regulations that govern all of this. It's a constant thing. So yeah, it's possible, but I don't believe we'll get to that point.
Are there things we could purchase that would be as advantageous to us in doing it in a shorter term than a longer term?
Not sure.
Are there things we can buy with it that, like supplies that don't degrade over time, what we could have ahead before they change, for the next government officials decide their changes?
Yeah, we have, I believe we have enough qualifying expenditures in our regular budget that we could use those, turn them in for reimbursement and get everything that's left at this point.
Does that make sense, Randy? In other words, we don't have to go out and buy anything. There are things we've already spent money on that would qualify under this that we could just charge to that account, and then that would essentially mean those dollars we spent are ours to save or use how we saw fit. So fortunately, there's really nothing we have to go and buy with this.
We've got plenty of expenses already.
Yes. Yeah, there's plenty of expenses that we could charge to these dollars if we chose to do that.
Because we're, in our general fund alone, we're spending close to $90 million. And so to go in and find the 15 or whatever the balance is, we could do that.
As an example, and it's public record, so I don't think you'll beat me too much up for sharing this. Blackfoot School District, for example, with Esser 2, charged their employees' health insurance to Esser 2. So they had to pay for that anyway. They just paid it out of these dollars and then recouped that savings from their general fund. So that's one example of how a district has done that in the past.
By doing that, they've now accessed the funds and have no strings on the funds they have. So that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, so they spent the federal dollars, and now what they would have spent out of their general account or their state funding, they have complete discretion over, and there's no timeline, there's nothing tied back to that. So that's one thing one district in our area has done.
Yep. And that's because we've backfilled quite a bit. We've done some of the medical insurance, we've done some utilities. When we look at what are we actually going to submit to the state for, we look at a couple different things. One, what is the State Department going to sign off on, and what are our financial auditors going to sign off on? Because those are two different tests that they're going to look at. And it's much easier for an auditor to sign off on utilities and medical insurance than it is for salaries, because salaries have a whole different set of rules that we have to go through. So this is where I wanted to bring the 50 cents back, just kind of as perspective to a second grader. 50 cents is a ton of money. If I were to find 50 cents today, it would probably go in my pocket till I saw my granddaughter, and it would become hers, and it it wouldn't matter. So the perspective, the 15 million, bring that down to a teacher salary, it's about $2,000 each year for 4 years.
Is part of the point you're trying to make is that we don't want to get accustomed to that additional income because it's coming to an end?
Yeah, we can only spend it one time. And if so, as we'll see here in just a minute, if we choose to spend it on new things, then what we've got to start cutting is going to come sooner. Because you can't do both.
But the 15 million works out to be 3.7 million per year if you break it out that way.
Yeah, and
which compared to a $90 million budget, pretty small.
Right. Yep. So next slide just illustrates there are lots of ways that we can spend this according to the rules. We can spend it on facilities. I will caution you that once we start entering the facilities world with the federal government, there are more strict rules. You have to start paying what's called Davis-Bacon wages. You hear about, well, federal contractors get paid much more. We would have to follow those same rules for anybody paid with this federal money through a contract. And so there's different pieces that we have to look at. We can continue to backfill from the loss of the emergency levy, the increased costs of Black Canyon, and the state holdbacks. We can certainly look at one-time staff costs or other allowable expenditures, which, as I mentioned, the 15 million is pretty loose strings. Pretty loose strings.
Isn't Davis-Bacon for most construction around $32 an hour? So anybody you contract has to pay their employees, so you don't get a big bang out of your buck. That's what you're saying.
Yes, exactly. So I want to look just at three scenarios. Somewhat the two extreme ends and then something that may be kind of in the middle. So the first one, and just because I can. So the first one is to use all of that 15 million to backfill the loss from the emergency levy, because remember, it's not just 1 year that we lost the emergency levy. It was 2021, 2022, and the assumptions are that that will continue. I haven't built in any emergency levy going forward.
And I guess to the guy's point, we have not done anything yet to address the loss of the emergency levy. So in other words, we haven't cut staff, we haven't frozen salaries. There's no significant ways that we've cut expenditures to address that loss. And so at some point, we're going to, because we have to do either have those dollars or we have to cut expenditures to make up for the loss of those dollars.
And the state just announced a tax cut, so they've made money, but we're probably not going to get that much more back to the schools. We're going to give it back to the people. Is that what it sounds like?
So the assumption that I've made here is that whatever the state gives us, we pass along through salaries and benefits, which has been our typical pattern. We don't, when the state gives us new money, we don't typically put that away. It comes in and it goes out. So that's the assumption that I've made here. So if we take all of that 15 million and use that to backfill as long as we can, a couple things are going to happen. We're going to have to do kind of what we talked about earlier. We're going to have to spend some of it before the deadline runs out. So what that will do in our general fund is our fund balance is temporarily going to go higher than the 5% that we target, because we're really spending the federal money, keeping our local money so that we can spend it at a later time. If we follow that plan, it would be your budget hearing in June of 2025 when we would come and say, we've got $2.8 million that we have got to cut out of the budget for fiscal year 2026. So and tonight is not probably the right time to talk about what are those budget cuts. I think that would be an easy thing to get into, and we can certainly do that. That's not the purpose of tonight. But just remember, when we start talking about 2.8 million in budget cuts, that 90% of our expenditures are salary and benefits. And so we're really talking about classified, because we can't, if we drop our number of teachers, we also lose revenue from the state, so it doesn't make any sense. So we're really talking about classified staff.
It's probably the same list that we were talking about when we were trying to pass the supplemental levy.
Yes.
Most recently, right? Or at least very related to that
Yes.
list.
Yep. Yep.
There's not a lot of flexibility.
Yep.
Is my recollection of that discussion.
You're right.
Yep. So this assumes no change in the supplemental levy. So if you think about the students that this is going to impact, this is the current year 8th graders. When they start their senior year, that is the year that we will have some pretty major budget cuts. Or the students who were born in 2020, they'll be entering kindergarten the year that those budget cuts will be made. Those are the students who will be impacted. Any questions on that scenario?
Well, I don't have any. I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen between now and then. I mean, there's talk of legislation.
Property values could drop.
Increase classified staff income, and where we could technically reduce our supplemental levy, but you're not, in this scenario, we're assuming the supplemental levy will stay the same, because, I mean, my thought would be, where do we get the extra money? We'd have to look at the supplemental levy.
Yep.
To increase it, which may or may not happen.
Right. Yep. That's why, as I started to play with different scenarios, I thought there's so many different ways I could go. I picked, these are the ones that I would start with, knowing that there are certainly lots of ways, and there will be other things that change. But really what it comes down to is, unless if we get more money from the state or we get more money from the supplemental, if we take all of that money and pass it along, it does nothing to address the shortfall. The only way we address the shortfall is by spending less money than what we receive from the state or local going forward.
You don't you cut personnel, you don't cut their wages, or you do both? Is that what you're proposing?
Well, I'm not proposing any specific budget cuts.
No, but if 90% of it is salary and wages.
The only way you're going to get there is by looking at classified staff.
But when you've done that in the past, are you looking at cutting wages or eliminating personnel?
So, are you okay if I jump in? So the last time that we had to have that intensive a discussion was in the Great Recession. And at that time, the state gave us more flexibility on reducing both certified staff and classified. And so we did both. We froze salaries and we eliminated positions. But right now we don't have that same flexibility with certified that we had before. So to answer your question, in my mind, if we get to this scenario, we'd be likely to be looking at pay freezes for certified, because there's some specific state laws that limit our ability to reduce wages for certified staff, and I don't think this would qualify under those criteria. So the best case we could do is essentially freeze those wages, and what that does is as the state increases the funding for them, we can recoup that additional funding and turn it into fund balance. And then with classified, we'd have to both freeze wages and likely look at layoffs to get there if we're eating all that in 1 year.
Yes, so the next scenario is, make sure, so I'm actually going to skip ahead. No, we'll stick with B. So scenario B is that we're going to use all the $3 million of Esser funds to backfill.
again, our fund balance will temporarily exceed 5% because of some timing things. We would use $3 million for one-time expenditures, whether it was facilities, one-time payments to staff, or whatever. We just somehow we use that $3 million as one time. At that point, we would also have to cut $500,000 for next year and $500,000 each year. So it's not the same $500,000. So this next year we would cut $500,000. Next year we would continue to roll with that and cut an additional $500,000. Next year we would just keep adding $500,000 to those cuts, so that it would be a much smaller bite.
So we're going to be doing 1.3 a day? No,
So if we start that, so that you would be your budget hearing this year, you would have to cut $500,000, and then 3 more budget hearings, you would also be doing that $500,000.
And then maybe 2 million,
and then we can
shortfall of 800,000.
Right, because you have the cumulative effect of those cuts over 4 years. The math doesn't work out exactly right, but it gives you the general idea. So, and that certainly would be probably a nicer way to affect the cuts, because trying to cut $2.8 million out in 1 year is a pretty major blow. But if we, so the $500,000, it could be $250,000 of cuts and $250,000 of new money from the state that doesn't get passed on. So there's lots of combinations to come up with that $500,000 that we would need to do each year. That certainly is an option.
Well, did you say earlier that the increases in supplemental don't help address this issue? Did I hear you?
No, if we, he's, no, go ahead, Guy.
If we increase the supplemental and just pass it on, it doesn't help.
Okay. Yeah. But we could increase that supplemental with the sole purpose of
right.
backfilling.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, again, I probably a little bit ahead of the discussion, but in my mind, I think it's prudent that we identify what the cuts would be, and then we give our patrons the opportunity to decide whether they want to fund those cuts through the supplemental or have them eliminated. I know sometimes we get accused of making threats when we do that. It's not, in my mind, it's not a threat. It's here's our budget plan, and let our patrons determine what they want to do. Yeah. So
I think one of the things that we will do this year as we develop the budget and bring it to you for approval is include a section of here's what the current supplemental levy generally pays for. I don't think we can tie it down to exact dollars, but I think we can give the patrons a pretty good idea that, okay, we've got to vote to renew this next year. If it doesn't pass, here's the things that go away. And it's not a threat, it's the budget. It's what it is. That the voters choose. What the voters choose. Give it one. So there's scenario B. Scenario C is the kind of the other extreme. So we have roughly $9 million left that we have not spent or drawn down from the state yet. If we say we're done, we're not going to spend any more of that to backfill, we would, first of all, we would drop below our 5% contingency this year. At June 30th, we would be a little, I don't know, somewhere probably about $1 million below 5% contingency. But we would have $1 million to do, whatever we decided to do, whether it's facilities, personnel, whatever allowable. So you can kind of see the extremes and what's the right way to use that one-time money. Because there certainly are people that are working extremely hard. I mean, I think everybody's very aware of what happened when we got back from Christmas break. And the teachers, the employees in the school, the classified, it has been everything they can do to survive.
Doesn't it make sense to pay this money and get money in those streams when there's just a lot of options? Start using it for healthcare, go to savings account.
We could. So if we took
gives us more flexibility in those scenarios.
So if we just drew everything down, put in requesting, and drew down the 9 million, then our fund balance and our general fund would go up $9 million. And so you and I know that we're talking about that, why it went up. The further we get away from tonight, the more that I believe that will be a loss. I mean, if we're talking about this in 4 years, when that $9 million is gone out of the general fund, and we start talking about cuts or whatever, nobody's going to remember tonight. I'll remember it. I don't know if anybody else will.
But I think to Guy's point, what we need is a plan on what we're going to do, and then we can determine the right way to do that, whether that's to, like you suggest, draw down everything now, or whether it's best to keep that at the state level so that it doesn't become a topic of negotiations or use it for this or use it for that. But I think we need to come together and come up with what our plan for these one-time dollars is.
Those things are good advantages. No strings, and we don't know if very much put more restrictions, more restrictions are better. So we take the head of our sleeves.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that it does there is a study that's put out at the end of every year after all the audits are complete, where they go through and they look at the fund balance, what happened to the fund balance in districts. And that's a report that goes to the legislature. And that would certainly be a headline.
Yeah, in other words, we're not the political ramifications of having that much money in savings.
Yes.
Yep.
Most of you don't need the money now.
Yep.
You got it. Exactly.
And the question is, what will be 4 years from now, and we have to cut, or we want to increase supplemental revenue? The question is, are we doing it for, what do you guys do with all that money? Why are we having to?
Yeah, and that is one thing that we've had really good discussions about, and that we'll need to continue to discuss, and that is there are some of our patrons that believe we should use these dollars to give them an additional tax break. So in addition to the tax break that they're getting from the state, in addition to the tax breaks from the federal government, they're also asking for us to give them a tax break from our local tax dollars, and think that's the only way we should use these dollars. When I read the federal guidelines, that's not the intent of these dollars. It's for us to be able to continue to operate in the face of the pandemic, including retaining and hiring quality staff. And so if we use this simply as a tax break for our patrons, I personally don't believe we've lived up to what the expectations of these are. But that's a decision we're going to have to make. So that's kind of the push and pull of this is, do we honor the intent of these dollars, or do we simply pass them through to give our local taxpayers a local tax break as well?
I don't know. How's that? I mean, that just sounds ludicrous to me. And I don't mind being on the record saying that. Yeah. I would.
Yeah.
I wouldn't waste 5 seconds talking about that idea. That's just stupid.
Yeah.
And I know I'm not trying to convince you.
Yeah.
But that's just stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really there's lots and lots of details we can go into. I don't think in this format going into those details is helpful. Hopefully what's helpful is knowing we've got approximately $9 million that we can spend. The important thing to remember, we can spend it one time.
Yeah.
If we choose to use it on other than backfilling the holdbacks, then we've got to have some pretty serious discussions about our expenditures for the next several years.
And I know it's 10, and the last thing I want to do is pick a fight at 10 o'clock with you, Greg, but what I'd say is, I don't disagree, but I think that's exactly what we did when we did not levy our emergency levy. And that's, I recommended that to the board as well, but what we said is, we're going to use Esser dollars to backfill what we would have used an emergency levy to fill. And so we've done that this year, and we're now using one-time dollars for ongoing expenses because we're backfilling. So I think we have We've done it this year. I'm not excited about continuing to do that. Right, we gave them a 1-year tax break. Yeah.
And I know it's late, and I won't overdo this, but my only response to that would be, if that wasn't what we said, is we don't want to count on the emergency levy.
Right.
We made a philosophical
Right.
policy decision that the emergency levy
Yep.
is
Yep.
politically toxic,
Yep.
whatever we want to say, because it's something we do without voter approval.
Yeah.
And we said we weren't going to do that anymore.
Yeah.
At least
Yeah.
the current board, right?
Yep.
And so you're right, in one sense, I guess, we did give our patrons a tax break in that way.
Because we didn't cut,
any.
because we didn't cut expenditures this year. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, still have to wrestle with
Right.
what we're going to do about that.
Yep.
Somewhere in the middle of that, probably the right idea. If we're preparing next year's budget, which we're at the beginning stages of doing, we do need some direction.
Yeah.
And probably what I would do without direction is just continue to backfill.
Yeah.
Because I don't know.
Yeah.
I just feel like we've got to keep running what is running right now. So.
Yeah. What we had talked about is we need to have these discussions now because in my time in the district, we've never had a budget discussion with the board prior to going into negotiations. And so what we do is we take whatever the additional state funding is, we negotiate it with our certified teachers, pass that through, and then pass it along. So now's the time that if we're looking at a $500,000 or $1 million budget cut next year, we've got to know that now before we head into negotiations and our budget planning for the year.
Yeah, I agree. We've got to start giving you direction sooner rather than later about these issues. And I think there's Ray's point about I think that's worth thinking about, that there's that issue of, the $9 million, and the sooner we get it, the more flexibility we have. I think that's I don't know if Ray sounds like that's the right idea, but he's asking the right questions, right? And I appreciate that, and I want to think about that carefully too. And that obviously has some impact about timing of cutting expenses and some of those kind of issues. I'll just say generally, it feels to me like we need to start having a discussion about cutting expenses vis-a-vis the next supplemental levy.
Yeah.
That's really the voter question.
Yep.
Is what do you want us to do?
Yep.
And what are you willing to pay for?
Yep.
So anyway,
I think you just reminded me of something that's important, I think, for you to realize is because of the difficult time we've had in hiring this year, without even trying, we've cut $1 million out of our budget this year in salaries and benefits because we haven't been able to hire. The principals who are here could tell you lots of them, the majority of that is in special education, but also custodians, lots of our classified. We've had $1 million cut this year, and I'm projecting that $1 million cut remains. So if next year we hire those people back again, now we've got an additional problem. So that's what I have prepared for tonight. There's not easy answers, but certainly we'd like to talk through with anybody, or
I think we're going to start off with the very beginning. It seems way out of
The happy ending is that we work for District Number 3, and it is a great place to be. And I say that in all seriousness, as I sit in principals meetings and watch and listen to the principals and the district leadership wrestle with problems that a lot of them are foreign to me. I do not have the education background, but as I listen and watch them wrestle with tough decisions, when they have the bullying, the harassment, when they have the graduations, I mean, on and on. Disagree 3 is a great place to be.
No stories. No stories.
So I'm going to start with a story. The last time, well, just a quick one, but last time we talked about this policy was a 2-hour board meeting. Just so we start with that. Actually, we have 2 policies from the revenue instruction portion of the agenda. The first one is these are both just proposed for initial consideration. The first one is policy 2500 educational media center. And what we're proposing with this one, you can see the red green dates. I mean, you have all month before start lots of time to look at this. Remember that one was that we were adding that we're in the librarians, librarians looking at adding stuff that they need to go back and go in and use our 2540 selection adoption, that same policy that we have approved over there. And so that's the first one. The second one is the policy that we really updated a couple years ago when we had some issues with some curriculum, specifically English class and novel. We did really good at that. One of the things that we missed out on, and really I think what we were doing is we had a process that we had in place that wasn't in the policy, and so what we're doing is adding that process. That if a parent does have an issue with the person that we here's the process will follow, putting a team together to review that, to get back with the parents on that. So that's the section that was added. It's called processing for objections to use of written materials, and that's really what we'll see there.
No action required on all 2 items.
No, there's no action.
All right, thank you very much, and thanks all who participated. Is there any items that the board members would like to see on future, on the next, upcoming meetings?
So maybe I missed this, but the good conversation we had about the property that we might sell or consider surplus or whatever, what are we thinking is the process for coming to some conclusions?
Yeah. So if I may, just on the next work session, my notes say a discussion on tonight's property and gauging interest on surplusing any of those properties. Also looking at the funds that we have left from the Black Canyon bond and the use of those funds, specifically related to both the transportation center as well as some needs we may have at Black Canyon. And then it is the time we need to start discussing boundary changes as well, so that if we have boundary changes this year, we're doing that in time to make appropriate staffing transfers and those things, as well as one minor change to our, for the 3rd time, to our calendar for next year based on survey results. So those are the items that I have as follow-ups from tonight's meeting.
Just for the thing on the back end, there's 837,000 or something. Where can that, so we can be thinking whether that be used?
Just at Black Canyon for equipment, facilities, capital projects at Black Canyon, or to purchase property. Or we can go out to voters to be authorized to use it for another purpose. But the current authorized purposes are just those 2.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right,
I'll second it.